Good evening. The special meeting of the Annapolis City Council for Monday, September 26th will be called to order at 7:05 p.m. At this time, would everyone willing and able please stand for the invocation given by Alderman Pfeiffer, followed by the pledge.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would just ask for a moment of silence as we contemplate the people's business this evening. Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam City Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Mayor Panelides.
Present.
Alderman Budge.
Here.
Alderman Payon.
Present.
Alderwoman Pendell-Charles.
Present.
Alderwoman Finlayson.
Present.
Alderman Littman.
Present.
Alderman Kirby.
Present.
Alderman Pfeiffer.
Present.
Alderman Arnett.
Present. Mr. City Attorney, would you please present our first item?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. First item tonight is... Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. First item tonight is the approval of the agenda.
At this time, I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda as amended, or to approve the agenda. Apologize.
So moved.
Second.
Which one? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed? The ayes have it. Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the next item on the agenda?
Mr. Mayor, next item on the agenda is a presentation about the proposed acquisition of the Eisenhower Golf Course.
All right. If the representatives of Anne Arundel County would join us. And the floor is yours. If you could just state your name, title, and address for the record, please.
Good evening. My name is Mark Hartzell. I'm the Chief Administrative Officer in Annapolis County. I reside at 6 Brook Avenue, Annapolis, Maryland, 21401. Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council, we thank you for the opportunity to allow us to come before you and present Anne Arundel County's proposal to acquire Eisenhower Golf Course. Anne Arundel County is interested in purchasing Eisenhower from the City of Annapolis to preserve a municipal recreation area for the residents of Anne Arundel County as well as the City of Annapolis. Further, we strongly believe this purchase would be mutually beneficial to both the counties and the city alike. The current state of the golf course and its facilities are in dire need of repair in order to retain its viability for years to come, as you will see from the presentation to follow. Anne Arundel County is in a position to spend the dollars necessary to keep this asset alive. Further, it is also a way for the City of Annapolis to monetize this asset and utilize the monetary infusion of cash to the city's benefit. Again, we thank you for this opportunity.
For the record, Rick Anthony, I'm Director of Recreation and Parks for Anne Arundel County, and I will just begin the presentation. I believe you all have copies in front of you as well on the screens. I'm just going to start with the course description. It is an 18-hole parkland-style course with a mixture of cool seasoned turf grass on greens, fees, fairways, and roughs. There are 19 green complexes, which does include the practice green, 53 green and fairway bunkers. We have a 4,200 square foot clubhouse that also includes golf cart storage, pavilions, square foot primary, and a 1,200 square foot secondary maintenance shop. 175 space asphalt parking, irrigation pump house, single row irrigation system, one on-course restroom station, asphalt cart paths, 12 stall practice range. The history, a little bit of it, is obviously it's located in Crownsville, Anne Arundel County. Course was designed by Edmund Alt. Construction began in 1966 by Bracco, but was completed by Anne Arundel County. The lease agreement between the county and city of Annapolis was executed in 1966. It opened for play in June '69. At that time, the agreement was the city would get $5,000 plus 20% of net revenue. From some of our records, it doesn't look like the course actually started earning money till in the 90s, and that's when we went to a 50-50 split. Obviously, it's owned by the city. It is operated, as I mentioned, 50-50 from the city and the county, and has currently been managed by Billy Casper Golf since 2004.
For the record, John Hammond, 141 Monticello Avenue, and I'm the budget officer for Anne Arundel County. On slide number 7, we have some brief financial results comparing 2006 to 2015, and you can see that the revenues were $1,700,000 in 2006, and in 2015 they were down about $100,000 to $1,600,000. Operating income was $520,000 in 2006, and the most recently completed year, 2015, was $325,000. And as Rick mentioned, under the lease, the profits, now that the debt service has been paid off, are split 50-50. So the cash contribution to the city in 2006 was $260,000, and in 2015 it was $162,700. There's some operating data there showing that the number of rounds played has basically been flat, down a little bit over the 10 years, and the average green fees have slipped a bit, although the number of rounds for outings has increased compared to those 2 years.
For the record, my name is Kevin Johnson. I'm the PGA General Manager of our golf course for the Capital Police. Living 161 Ballin. We had a couple of pictures of current golf course conditions. What you see on the screen here are pictures of 3 separate putting greens that Eisenhower taken 2 weeks ago. Obviously, the conditions are a lot to be desired. So those are 3 putting greens. Here are 4 fairways. You can see a lot of rough turf, dead grass. Lower left-hand corner is spider grass, crabgrass, and some of the fairways. Next slide is 3 different tee boxes that Eisenhower, which is representative of pretty much what you see in the entire golf course. A lot of fair play down the top. Traditionally, what happens to the golf course basically? Sorry, the latter part of June through the end of September. Challenges on the golf course, you see again more pictures of the clubhouse. Clubhouse has mold issues, roof issues, it leaks. It's basically gutted right now. We're not using it at all due to the mold issues and the leaking roof. The golf cart barn, same thing. It's in need of dire repair. Just a couple pictures of that. I will. All right, so our challenges, one of the biggest issues we have on the golf course is the current level of spending, what is being spent to upkeep the golf course. We don't have the adequate number of staff just to handle the everyday challenges of managing this property. Most of our golf equipment, it says 95% here, is probably closer to 98%, is past its life expectancy, meaning if I was to equate it to a car, it'd probably have 300,000 miles on it. That's how old most of the equipment is. Most of the equipment we have is actually not even Eisenhower. It's owned by Compass Point, and it was original equipment they bought when the golf course was purchased, and now we're using it secondhand. Another key element there is we don't have an on-course golf mechanic, which is very, very important. Again, I mentioned the clubhouse already in the slides. It was built in 1968 during construction. No upgrades to the facility whatsoever. Both structures, not only the clubhouse but our maintenance facility, have mold and structural issues. There's no banquet space. There's limited grill room space. There's limited storage and office space. Cart barn, again, you saw pictures of, again, is deteriorating. Roof issues, mold issues, water issues. The cart barn is structured in a way we cannot rotate our golf cars. Ideally, you'd like to have an entry and exit way, almost like a parking garage, where you can pull out one particular cart at one time if we need to work on a cart or we need to rotate carts for usage. The way the cart barn is structured right now, if I needed to get to cart number 38, I'd probably have to pull out 50 other golf cars just to get to that golf car. We have had multiple break-ins to that structure. Since it's separated from the clubhouse, it's not very secure. You can literally just pull the wood off the walls and kind of walk right in.
Fairways, you saw pictures of the fairways. You saw what those look like. Tees, we would like to convert those to Bermuda grass. Right now, the golf course is a mixture of cool season grasses along with some pests or some weeds. Ryegrass, I'm not sure how familiar everyone is with turf grass. Ryegrass is a cool season grass. It does not hold up to heat and humidity. Everybody knows how hot it's been this summer, hence what you saw in the photos. The ryegrass cannot take any sort of heat or humidity, and once it does, it actually just dies out. So when you don't have a strong turf grass, which we don't at Eisenhower, you're susceptible to weeds, which you saw in the slides, crabgrass, spider grass, nutsedge, kalinga grass, which are dominant on our golf course right now. The conversion of Bermuda grass will help certainly improve the playing surfaces, but also reduce the amount of weeds, reduce the amount of pesticides and chemicals we put on the golf course. Irrigation system upgrades. Eisenhower is probably one of the few courses left that I know of that has what is called a single row irrigation system, meaning the irrigation runs directly down the middle of each fairway and sprays to the edges of the fairways. So a lot of times the irrigation system is not strong enough. In our case, it is not strong enough to reach to the outer edges of the golf course. So a lot of times tees don't get irrigated, the roughs don't get irrigated. The system we have, again, it's original, so it's 50 years old. The heads, which are the actual apparatuses that come out of the ground and spray the water on the golf course, are not even made anymore. So if one breaks, we don't even have the opportunity to find parts to fix it. So we end up trying to jerry-rig pieces of other irrigation systems together. The main line is undersized. The main line is what actually brings the water onto the golf course. That is undersized and certainly needs to be replaced. Greens. When people talk about golf course, usually the first thing they talk about is layout and then the condition of the greens. Our greens are old push-up greens, meaning when they were built, literally the construction crew just pushed dirt up into a pile and put grass on top of it. They are 50 years old. They have no internal drainage, meaning there's no way to get surface water off and out of the greens. Ideally, you would like to have not only surface runoff, but also drainage internally in the greens to get the water down and out. We do not have that. The USGA, which United States Golf Association, recommends greens to be rebuilt every 20 to 25 years. Again, we are at a 50-year lifespan. They've never been touched. The soil is clay-based. Again, we go back to surface drainage. Water cannot get down and out of the green. So if we were to pull a core sample of our putting surfaces, you'd get about 2 inches of sandy turf, and below that is thick, dark clay. That's all, and it's just saturated with water. Again, we cannot get the water out of the ground. So just to take a quick step back, when we talk about putting greens, the goal to get the water down and out is to strengthen the turf grass. So what we want is roots to go down looking for water. So if water's sitting up on the top level where it is, the roots are never going to go down looking for that water, and that's what we have right now. Our roots are about 2 inches long. Ideally, you'd like them 5, 6 inches long. Drainage. Drainage is a significant issue. I spoke to it briefly about with greens. We have a significant drainage problem at Eisenhower. We collect water. We take the water runoff from General's Highway. We take it from the fairgrounds. We take it from Indian Creek School. We take it from Summer Hill Trailer Park. All that filters into our irrigation pond, which is off the 11th hole. And the creeks in that pond are just not adequate enough. They're not wide enough. They're not deep enough to handle the amount of water. 50 years ago, yes, probably. But today, they just can't handle the amount of water coming onto the pond. So we think the pond certainly needs to be dredged, and then we need to look at doing something with the creeks and the runoff on the golf course. Tee expansion, again, you saw some of what the tees look like in the photos. The idea behind tee expansion, the larger the tee, the more we can rotate the tees so we don't have golfers teeing off in the exact same spots over and over and over again, allow that grass to repair itself naturally. Tee expansion is not only good for acquiring better players, it's good for keeping players that you have. Ideally, the more tees you have allows a multitude of golfers to play at a yardage that suits their skill level. You don't want to have a golf course that's too long or too short. You want to be able to suit everybody's needs. Bunkers, I didn't do any pictures of bunkers, but our bunkers are, for lack of a better term, basically mud pits. They are filled with rock, dirt. Again, going back to drainage, ideally you want a bunker that is a sand-based bunker. Again, water comes in, goes down and out. Again, we do not have the drainage or the capacity to get the water in the bunkers out of the bunkers, through the bunkers out of the bunkers. Bunkers normally last 2 to 5 years. Again, we're going on 50 years. We have done some bunkers in-house, but again, it's with limited resources. We've done the best we can, but my staff is not a construction crew. We can only do what we can do. So we've tried to do a few, but again, they certainly need to be redone. Tree work. Again, Eisenhower's 50 years old. The trees are overgrown, to say the least. The goal with having turf grass is you need sun, you need airflow to allow the turf to survive. We have several holes that are completely covered by trees. So at any given time of the day, 12 noon, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, some tees or some greens are still in shade. So when you have turf grass that you're mowing at the heights we mow it at, you absolutely need sunlight, you need airflow, and the trees are a huge, huge problem. We are not looking to eliminate trees, but do a lot of pruning, limbing up, just cleaning up to allow some sun and air to get to the golf course. Also, a lot of the tree roots have actually destroyed some of the cart paths on the golf course as well. And that segues into cart paths. They are old asphalt cart paths. They've probably been resurfaced 3 to 4 times. Again, I mentioned the tree roots. There are potholes in multiple areas of them. They all really need to come out and be redone. Again, just to summarize the challenges here, maintenance, equipment, and payroll is definitely a challenge. The clubhouse, cart barn facility, the turf grass being ryegrass, again, we'd like to convert that to a Bermuda grass turf. Irrigation system, double row needs to be upgraded to a single row needs to be upgraded to a double row. Greens, again, 50-year-old greens, no internal drainage, very little surface drainage. Golf course drainage in general. The tees need to be expanded and regrassed. Bunkers need to be renovated. Tree work done, and cart path work. So USGA recommendations. I mentioned USGA earlier. United States Golf Association is the entity that runs golf in the United States, and they have an agronomy department, and I've asked them to come down and give their independent assessment of the condition of Eisenhower, and they did this back in May, and their recommendations were a new double row irrigation system, to rebuild all 19 putting greens and surrounds, and when they say surrounds, they mean bunkers that surround the putting surfaces, upgrade all the maintenance equipment, rebuild and upgrade the maintenance facility, an extensive drainage plan, and a complete bunker renovation.
As you all can hear by the description that Damien provided, there's some significant issues that currently reside at Eisenhower Golf Course. A number of the aldermen were out there to view it before, as well as some of the staff, and I know some of the aldermen have also played the course a number of times. So you know for yourself the state of Eisenhower. There's some impediments in the way, though. The impediments are there's a large expenditure that needs to be put in order to make the improvements happen. The city could be in a position where it's capital constrained. However, the county is in a position, as I had mentioned before, to move forward with that, but we cannot do it without owning the facility, hence why we're here in front of you today. And then finally, we talk about the proposal, what is being considered to purchase. You have the details in front of you, but 215.96 acres. There's an 18-hole golf course, which Damien just described. It's a 2-story masonry clubhouse, 1-story metal and masonry maintenance building, 1-story metal maintenance building, another story frame cart storage building. And the proposed purchase price that the county was willing to offer the city is $3.1 million. So where did that number come from? That number came from, there were three proposals that were done, surveys that were done on the course. The $3.1 million is right in the middle of where those surveys came out. The dollar amounts were one was priced at $2.8 million, another one was priced at $3.1 million, and then the third was priced at $3.15, $3,150,000. So that's the 3.1 million is the purchase price that the county is putting forth in front of the city today. With that, concludes our presentation. Happy to take questions. Again, thank you for your time. So,
Does anyone have any questions? Alderman Budge.
You mentioned that there were 3 surveys done of, or proposals or something that were at these various
Appraisals.
price points. Who did these surveys? What are they?
yeah, the appraisals were done.
What kind of number? Who were you talking to here that came
Yeah.
up with these numbers?
The county undertook 2 of them, and one was done by the Weinhold Group, and that came back at an appraisal value of 3.1 million. Another one that the county did was with Worthington Associates, and that price point came back at $3,150,000. And then the third one was undertaken by the city, and that was done by Richard Marlowe, and that came back at $2.8 million.
And why do you think there is such a large discrepancy between those estimates and the state assessor, who's at $4 million?
I'm not familiar with the state assessor's dollar amount at $4 million, so I can't answer the question.
I think you'll find, Alderman Budge, that typically the state assessors don't spend a lot of time doing a lot of work on assessments of tax-exempt property. I think you will find that uniformly across the state. I can point out that back when, in 2011, I believe this property was assessed at $9 million, just to show you that how the state really doesn't pay a great deal of attention to tax-exempt property. No one's going to appeal the assessment on an exempt property.
Thank you. We'll take $9 million.
Anyone else? Alderman Arnett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of questions. One, I'm kind of curious how this golf course got into such disrepair. I mean, clearly the mold and the leaking roof and all of those things were things that were easily identifiable and should have been addressed. And certainly before it got full of mold and a lot of the other disrepair. So I'm kind of curious as to how we got to this state.
Well, I as the manager, it's there are things we can request. We certainly ask for things, and I don't necessarily know beyond my level what happens at the county level. I know these gentlemen here sitting with me know how dire the situation is. I don't necessarily know the priorities of previous administrations. I certainly can't speak to that. I can just speak to what I know is happening now, where I know this is a important issue for these gentlemen. I don't know if somebody else would.
I think the real story is that I think the record will show that the county has expressed interest in trying to renegotiate the lease over the last 6 or 7 years, and was never able to make any progress with the previous administration. And not knowing the future of the long-term future, the modus operandi was try to temporize and make things as good as we can for a while, and hopefully we will get some sort of definitive answer from the city as to what their long-term plan is. And until we got that, there was no point in trying to do some of these major improvements that needed to be done.
Right. Well, thank you. So somehow it got into the state, so that raises the question, why do you want this mess? I mean, if it's so terrible,
Well, I think
why
from
don't you dump it on us?
From the standpoint of the county executive, he recognizes that it's an important recreational amenity, and he certainly recognizes that there are limits to what the city can really do. And I think the county executive has made a real effort to put a hand out to the city and say, let me see what I can do to help you along in a number of areas. And this is one of the areas where, the folks that go out there that play golf, they don't care whether it's owned by the city of Annapolis or the county. They just want a decent facility. And I think in that vein, that's why the county executive is willing to step up to the plate and do what he can to not only help the city, but, I I would venture to say the vast majority of the players at that golf course are county residents. They're not city residents.
If I can add on to that too, from a department standpoint, it is a very important amenity to us. We're certainly proud of the play that it continues to get, even with the condition that it is in. We're already in the golf course with Compass Point, so this certainly increases our portfolio. If we're going to be in the golf course business, we want a golf course that we can be proud of and continue to provide. And there's a lot of golfers that are very happy to have Eisenhower in their area. So our goal here is just to make it better, to make it one of the best courses in the county.
Alderman Pan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In reviewing these things, I've got to say the major improvements that I think need to be done don't have anything to do with routine maintenance, but some of the stuff, particularly in the clubhouse and the tee boxes, I mean, you oversee it every fall. I realize things dry up in the summertime, but I just have to wonder that, you know, how well this course is being maintained. I mean, the things I see in the clubhouse were things that could and should have been fixed some time ago, and as a result of their not being fixed, it seems to me that the overall soundness of the structure has been negatively affected. Now, the cart barn, I have to admit, it's very simple construction. I don't think it was ever built to have, you know, serious security put into it, and okay, that's a policy decision. I didn't happen to think it was as bad as has been described to me when I saw it in person. Now, I have to admit what the USGA recommends, and part of the reasons for the proposal, I agree. There's some very major things that do need to be done, but I don't know. I just think that a lot of the day-to-day type use of the course has been negatively affected by it not being maintained. Again, I don't expect you to put in a brand new sprinkler system. I'm well aware of what's involved with rebuilding a green and the bunkers, and that certainly does not come under day-to-day maintenance. So some of this stuff does. I got to tell you.
Can I just speak to the, obviously I've been director for 2009, and Mr. Cosby here has also been there during that time. Prior to that, I don't think any of us can answer what truly happened with the investments that needed to be made in the course. I can tell you that I think the agreement was flawed. I think that there should have been some built-in contingencies that would give us a 10-year cycle of the proper investments that the course should have been made, and that never happened. So by the time 2009 came around, we were already in dire need. And I can tell you that Mr. Cosby has several conversations with me about we really need this, we really need to get this going. The problem is, if you can all recall, 2008 is when the economy crashed. No one had any appetite to sink money into the golf course. So that's what we've been dealing with since 2008, 2009. I've certainly made it clear to all of the elected officials that I've been involved with, who tried to reach out to the previous administration in the city, and quite frankly, the politics just never lined up, and we got nowhere. So just a testament to the working relationships that we're here today. This is the farthest that we've ever gotten, and we certainly appreciate being able to finally let our voices be heard.
And if I can speak to the day-to-day operation, yes, for looking at it from 10,000 feet, it would say, a layman would say, well, why aren't you doing something about this? It's hard to combat weather when you don't have the infrastructure to combat the problem. So if I have an irrigation system that can't reach a tee box with a cool season turf to keep it warm, to keep it cool, nothing but dead turf, that's all you're going to get. So if I can't irrigate it to keep it cool,
No hook up with a hose or anything?
I can't do that at midnight. Irrigation normally runs at night when it's cool. You want it to run it at the coolest temperature to cool the plant down. We do syringe during the day when it's hot. We syringe greens and tees. We do absolutely do that. But when you get a cool season grass, and ryegrass is used up north, it's used in Wisconsin, it's used in Michigan, it's used in the mountains.
I remember we talked about
Yeah, it's not used in Maryland. I'd be hard pressed to find another golf course in this region that uses ryegrass on tees and fairways. It just doesn't happen. It was most likely built that way because it's inexpensive, and you can continually overseed it. But all we're doing is just putting throwing bad money down the ground. We continue to overseed, and really all we're doing is basically triage every year. So every fall when we overseed, it's to recover from what you've seen on the slides.
Thank you, sir. Alderwoman Pendle Charles.
Yes, I'd like to make two comments. Number one, and I read Mr. Morris's e-newsletter. I'm very happy. I'm not a golfer, but I'm happy to see that a lot of the children from the Stanton Community Center have benefited from the golf course, and Mr. Archie Trader has been the person who's been a catalyst for that. So I think that's a wonderful thing. Number two, there was some discussion concerning possibly the city having still playing a part in this golf course, whether the split would be 90-10 or 95-5 or some sort of sustainability, financial sustainability over time. Has that been explored or researched?
Alderperson, yes, that actually has, and I apologize. I thought that information was actually sent along to you. So we did a split at 7%, which you had requested before. We did a split at 50%, and we did another split at 100%. 100% obviously being reflected in the purchase offer today. But we're happy to send that information along to you, so you have that.
Yeah, I think that would be great, especially since our students and our young people are also using the golf course as well. It's something worth exploring. I'm not saying that's what we're going to do. But thank you so very much.
Yeah.
Alderman Kirby.
Yeah, thank you. I guess 50 years of partnership with Eisenhower Golf Course, and I've heard it a million times with my colleagues that it's fallen in such disrepair. There have been times where the city was financially capable maybe to do some modest repairments to the course during those 50 years. There have been times absolutely we're not able to. The administration has changed, and right now it remains an asset of the city of Annapolis. So I can't help but believe that this didn't happen overnight. We have all the city counter partnerships with the new administration, and you, by your own voice, it's closer than we've ever been before. What I need to know now is, because you have a pot of money that can only be used if you own the golf course. Why weren't we at the table when you was getting this pot of money? So perhaps we could be a party to the pot of money and still fix the course. I'm not understanding. We have to sell the golf course, or it has to stay in disrepair.
Well, what you're asking us to do is to invest the county money and share the profits with you when you're not willing to put up any of the money. That's not a great deal.
It is if you sit where I sit. But
well, I used to sit where you sat, and I'd probably say the same thing you just said.
You talk like you're from Ward 1.
No, Mr. Hammond, in all due respect, I guess with the course being under the county pretty much for 50-some years, and we should have been informed of some of the things that need to be repaired that wasn't going to fix itself. Sometimes grass just grows, other times it does not. Seeding, irrigation systems, it probably had to be changed. I just can't see us getting to the point right now where we're being asked to sell an asset because it's in disrepair. And is it county money, or is it some type of grant where the county has to own it before, or you can't use the money?
Well, first of all, I'd say that
because last I checked, the city of Annapolis and around the county too.
This shouldn't have been news to somebody in the city, because, as I say, we have been trying over the years to work with the city to deal with the improvements that we've seen needed there. I know back in 2011, there was a great deal of discussion going on about what needed to be done, and we just couldn't make any progress.
Make a comment right now. There's been a lot of talk about the history of the golf course getting fixed, the history of not putting money into it, and the history of the revenue split. So I think when you go back, you got to look back to the 1950s when this came, and it actually tied back to the mayor and the county executive in a partnership. Pitt Moyer and Joe Alton were first cousins, and they decided to go out and buy a golf course together, and we've had Eisenhower ever since. The county executive and I have a strong relationship, and I think one of the things we've seen is that the county's been very supportive of the city. You know, we're going to talk later tonight about them bearing the cost of our elections. That's upward of $200,000. We've asked for money in transportation. They went from $173,000 up to $750,000. So I think from the county's point of view, owning Compass Point and other golf courses, due to economies of scale, it's more efficient for them to run this golf course, and they have a vested interest in it. When you talk about the capital obligations, yes, the city could kick Anne Arundel County out and run this golf course ourselves, keep the money. I think Director Miller will tell you we're at our revenue cap. You think about the water treatment plant, you think about the bulkhead, we got to build Hillman Garage, have to rebuild Main Street. We're not going to have the money to put this in there. And more importantly, to Mr. Anthony's point, think about when this happened, 2008, when the recession happened. So I'm looking at Alderman Arnett. I see a lot of people from Eastport out there. I know people in Eastport and all over the city are going to be mad if we say, you know what, I can't fix your sidewalk, I can't fix your road because we're putting $1 million in an irrigation system or $2 million in a clubhouse. So from my point of view, we don't have the financial resources to fix up this golf course. It's an asset for the city. The county's willing to come in, take it over, run it, and give us a large sum of money. So I think it's kind of a win-win for the city and the county. Alderwoman Finlayson?
Yes, thank you. Along the same lines, if we were to keep the golf course, what would it cost us to bring it up to a condition where I'd want to play there again?
I think we've taken a look at what the costs are that need to be done to the golf course in order to get it. If you remember back what Damien said, was that we're well past the life cycle of the golf course. I mean, life cycle was about 25 to 30 years. We're at 50 years now. So in order to do that, it's going to take in the neighborhood of $4.5 to $5 million to do that.
And how long before you'd be able to recoup that investment?
Well, it depends on a number of things, but I guess I'll turn that over to John. If you pay the debt service off.
Well, the debt service on about $5 million, dependent upon the interest rate, is going to be somewhere around $300,000 a year for 30 years.
For 30 years.
Yeah.
You have open space money. I think that's what the Alderman Kirby was referring to. So are you still going to have to get funding, bond funding, to do what you want to do over there?
The open space money will be used to purchase. Okay, that'll be used to purchase.
Just to purchase it.
The $4.5 to $5 million will be a bond. We'll be issuing bonds in order to pay for the maintenance upkeep, if you will. That's where those dollars would come from. And so when John's referring to the debt service, that's the debt service we have to pay on that bond issuance.
Okay, so we're talking you're going to be investing about $8 million between your open space money and money that you'll have to borrow.
That's correct.
Okay. Well, I want to say thank you for the tour. It was an eye-opener and
appreciate you being there.
Helped me totally understand what we need to do.
Sure.
Could you talk to us a little bit about the timeline of this proposal and when we need to make a final decision on it?
Well, I can say a couple of things, Mayor. There's a few things that are coming up that are going to cause this decision to be sort of a quick one, and one being that there's a golf cart agreement that's coming due in November. To the extent that we can't come to the agreement, that's probably something that we're not likely to enter back into again, so that's coming up in November. We have an agreement that we've extended to for another year, which was in June, I believe, and so again, to the extent that we couldn't come to an agreement then, that's not something we'd be willing to move forward with again. So there are some milestones that are coming up that are kind of pushing this along, and again, to be honest with you, it's the time of year. Damien can certainly speak to this better than I can, but if we're going to make a decision, golf season is winding down, so it allows us then over these winter months to get our ducks in a row in order to move forward, not only with the financing, but then also with getting the maintenance and repairs done, beginning to get done over the winter months.
I have one question for Director Miller. Do we have $5 million in our capital fund space to do this, the repairs ourselves? The answer is supposed to be no, but go ahead.
We would have to go out to market, just like the county, to do the rehab.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Alderman Arnett?
So we are where we are. I do appreciate the county executive. I spoke with him directly, and he didn't have anything to do with the course deteriorating the way it did, and I really do appreciate the partnership that you and he have forged. But where do we, this body, go from here? I understand they have time pressures, and there's more than one. We have a decision to make. It's an important decision, and I'd like to know what the process is. Usually, you're going to sell something, you go out and get a number of bids. You don't just go to the first offer. So we have some time constraints on our part. So I don't know who's in charge of the city's game plan for how we would proceed to get rid of the course, whether it's to the county or anyone else.
I'll let the city manager, Tom Andrews, take it. So we have sold one piece of property before St. Mary's, and I think that was a big learning experience for all of us, to say the least, of what we went through. But I think the positive that happened is we worked out a lot of the issues along the way to make it somewhat smoother. But we have got three three appraisals. Appraisals.
And Alderman, they're quite detailed, so you can take some comfort in.
I've seen the appraisals, but I'm saying if we're going out now de novo, there are other people that are interested in this course, and certainly we would want to find out who they are and what their interest is and the price they would want to pay. It's not, if I were putting my house up, I wouldn't just take the first offer. I would want to see what the market. So because you have time pressures, and I think we have some also, we need a game plan on our side on how we're going to.
I'm not sure who the other people are, but I would tell them they should do it sooner rather than later. I mean, submit a bid as much as they can. They already saw what the county offered. And
we do have people working for the city that handle procurement and disbursements. Are they charged with doing something on this?
Mr. Andrews?
The council would have to consider an ordinance that would authorize the sale of the golf course at your earliest convenience if you wanted to proceed.
Well, but we need more information. We need to know who else is out there, what our other options are. Again, with appreciation of the county executive, it's basically take it or leave it. I asked, can we continue the partnership? No. Okay, fine. If those are the terms, those are the terms. But we need to do due diligence to see who else is out there. You mentioned the old rec center. We had several bidders on that. Mm-hmm. Why aren't we, or where is the process where we go out and start that to see who else is out there and what they're willing to pay?
I think the challenge would be the old rec center was something where you make money. And many times in government, when they say it's run like a business, we offer many services that don't make money. Transportation, we don't make money. I was talking with Anne Arundel County, the hospital, at the cardiac care unit, their mental health. They're expanding mental health because they see it as an asset to the community. It doesn't make money, it costs the hospital money. So I don't know many private entities that would come in here, but the capital investment needed to be made. I'm not saying we should entertain it. I'm just saying I don't see somebody coming forward in the next month offering us $5 million.
We're not trying. I mean, we don't need to take up their time. They've given us a very good proposal. We've heard it before. We understand it. But I think for this body, before we make a decision, we need to have more facts. We need to have more process. We need to know that there's somebody on staff that's in charge of pursuing this and pursuing other options and so forth.
We can. I think the one thing we know about the county, more than any other potential buyer, is what they plan to do with it, and that's keep it a golf course. So I think there's a lot of people that would buy it, soon tear it down and try to put up houses. And I know that's not the county's interest. So I think that's worth a lot as well.
But it could be worth a lot more money. I'm not interested in that because it's a critical area, but my point is we've had a one-sided dialogue here. We need to have our own dialogue, and we need to have a process from the administration to provide us with the information so that we can make a rational decision.
I will have the city manager and attorney write up something by the end of the week for everyone.
a process?
A process, how it's going to flow, yes.
All right, thank you.
We'll make it a top priority. Anyone else? Alderman Lippman?
Mayor, if I can also, excuse me, if I can just also add to that, the benefit of using POS acquisition funds, which we do happen to have a balance, and I can probably assure you that had we not been able to use POS acquisitions, we probably wouldn't be here today, obviously. But the benefits of using that fund is that it will protect the land, which right now there's no protection. So that open space funding will give it immediately a restriction on the deed where the course would have to remain in recreation use. And I'm sure that's a comfort to the many environmentalists and people that would not like to see homes built on that property.
Thank you for the presentation. I have a number of questions, but I don't want my questions to give the impression that I think this is an awful idea that the city should be walking away from. I'm more in the camp of the alderman from Ward 1, where I think the city just has a lot more work to do, and if it comes back where this is the best proposal, then so be it. But I think a lot more work has to be done. This is not like a transportation service where a lot of entities do make plenty of money offering a private golf course. So I do think we need to fully explore whether there's a private entity out there. I know I've gotten emails from private entities that wish to run the golf course for the city. Clearly there wouldn't be that interest if they didn't think there was a profit to be made. And I'm interested in finding out and better understanding the finances involved in this potential transaction.
If I could just on that one point, I think there's a number of people that are interested in running it. There's not a lot of people that are interested in owning it and fixing it up. So people would want to come in and do what Billy Casper does. There's not a lot of people beating down the door to say, let me invest $8 million.
Well, until we put out a formal procurement document, we're not going to really know the world of potential buyers, or frankly, or the world of potential people who want to operate that at a profit for the city. I think there is certainly a case to be made, and I'm not the expert. I think we need to have the information before we do anything. But there's certainly a case to be made that a entity could be running this property at a profit for the city. Certainly would take some upfront costs and bond money investment to make necessary improvements. But right now we're looking at a property that is in its worst possible state. Certainly most of us, when we go to sell a major asset, a home, a business, property, we fix it up before we look to sell it. And a lot of the fixes are not so expensive. I'd like to see, frankly, an itemized list of the expenses, an itemized list of the costs that are proposed. Changing out the grass seed doesn't have to be a multi-million-dollar improvement. I'm certainly curious, and to continue the thread of argument between Mr. Hammond and Alderman Kirby about where the county is on this. So on the one hand, we hear the county wants to bail out the city by buying it for us. Well, if the county wants to help the city out so much, potentially we can discuss asking for some money from the county to help us make the improvements and get it back on where it's in usable shape or better shape than it is now. And so if you have any comment on that, I'd certainly welcome your input on that.
Well, part of the partnership would be the city having to come up with its equity, just like the county would be coming up with its equity. And to the mayor's earlier point, he ran down a list of priorities that appear to be a little bit higher than putting in a new sprinkler line at the golf course. So that's, I appreciate those are the issues that you have to wrestle with. And I think what the county is offering here is the protection of the property being a golf course for now and forever. It'll be upgraded. And from the standpoint of a city resident that plays golf, there's no downside whatsoever. And there's plenty of upside because, in essence, you're monetizing that asset and can use it for some other recreational need or some other non-recreational need that you deem to be a higher priority.
The issue that was discussed earlier about the operator not putting more money to the property, you were saying that was, well, the county, that we're asking the county to put all this money in without the city putting money in, but that's not accurate because we're sharing revenue. So if the county and its thank you. If
not me, is it?
No. If the county and its operator had previously been investing the money, it would have been a reduction of revenue for the city, certainly, but it would also be in much better shape today.
Well, I've been around for a long time on both sides, as I've pointed out, and up until the mid-'90s, the golf course really wasn't generating a lot of revenue because we were paying the debt service on the original bonds. In the late 90s, there was a considerable desire on the part of then city fathers and mothers to generate some revenue from that golf course, and we were passing along the 50%, and there was no evidence whatsoever from the city's side that they wanted to plow that money back into the golf course. And again, that's one of the reasons we came to the city in the 2010-2011 timeframe and said, hey, the lease is coming up, there's things that need to be done, we need to start talking, and we just couldn't get beyond, we couldn't even get to first base.
Okay, fair enough. Part of the use of the property, as described, is to use as a drainage field for surrounding property. That's what its initial purpose was. I understand the commitment from the county to keep it as a golf course if it purchased it. Would it also be able to continue its use as a drainage for surrounding areas, or would any of those purposes or those access areas for the water be cut off?
Yeah, we don't have any intention to change that.
And you'd offer a commitment to continue allowing the property to be used for that purpose?
Well, and the pond there is an integral part of the irrigation system.
Right.
And as Damien pointed out earlier, one of the problems is that the pond has got to be silting in, and there's probably a lot more runoff going on because that pond can't hold all that it could.
Does the county have, and this is feeding off a piece of what Alderman Arnett was suggesting, I got to imagine that the county is looking at this not just as an opportunity to provide additional recreation, but as potential revenue. And I got to think there's some revenue analysis about what the puts and takes will be over the course of time. Is that something that the county can share with the city?
Well, again, it goes back to the $4.5 million that you plow in there. Right now, it's throwing off about $350,000, $325,000. The debt service on that investment is going to be chewed up pretty well by that bond issue to do those improvements for the next 30 years. And then, as we all have been talking about here, there's the ongoing need to maintain that investment that you've made. So whatever incremental revenue comes in during the early years, the 30 years of the bonds are outstanding, and beyond that, once the bonds are paid off, probably will be needed to be plowed back into the golf course to keep it in good condition. And obviously an integral part of the whole equation is what are the greens fees? With a municipal course, I think there's much more likelihood that the greens fees would be lower than with a third-party owner who has got to make a return on his investment, so the greens fees probably would be higher.
Do you have a projected present value of the net profit or loss for the next 30 years?
Just looking at the debt service on that kind of an investment, there may be $25,000 additional revenue beyond the debt service. I mean, one of the issues we have to deal with is to the extent that we sell bonds, do we have adequate coverage from the revenues that the course could generate to get an attractive interest rate? And to the extent that there's not a lot of margin there, the interest rate's going to be that much higher, which makes it even more difficult.
So have you done the analysis for the next 30 years to how all that's going to play out so that you can project a present value?
The debt service cost on $5 million is about $300,000 at a 3.5% interest rate. I think we can probably get a 3.5% interest rate right now. But a year from now, who knows?
So you have to remember, but you have to remember when you go back to what Mr. Anthony said before, that the decision to actually purchase a golf course isn't from a profit perspective from the counties. What we're looking to do is to complement Compass Point that we have today. We've made the decision to be in the golf business. We're willing to put the money into the golf course to see it as an ongoing asset in years to come. But as Mr. Hammond mentioned, I mean, you're talking about 25 to 30 years before you're really going to recognize any substantial revenue off of that investment in order to get the golf course up where it needs to be. So again, it's really the decision of the county. It really complements something that we already have today.
I appreciate that, but the city's also in the business of making long-term investments and water treatment plants that don't get paid off for, 50 years and so on. So it's not...
I think the difference between the county and the city at this point in time is the county's willing to put forth the capital to get the golf course where it needs to be as an ongoing entity. I'm questioning whether, and again, with all due respect to the people sitting before me, do you really have the cash to do that? And that's really, it comes down to a level of priority. Where do you want to put your cash?
Fair enough.
So,
fair enough. Is the city able to speak today, either Mr. Morris or Mr. Andrews, more about what the city's plan is going to be? I heard the mayor's commitment to have one by Friday, but surely you've been thinking about this for a while. What's the city's thought process on how you're going to go about thinking this through?
Well, I think the options are rather finite and perhaps obvious. We keep it, we don't make an investment, we let it go to seed. One. Two, you make a $5 million, we keep it ourselves, you make a $5 million investment. That's a decision that the council will have to make and give up something else to make that investment. We put it out to bid and see if there's any interested party out there that would be willing to pay more than $3.1 million for it. So the options are pretty finite. The question is timing.
Okay.
I think in terms of, if I may, Alderman, in terms of timing too, they mentioned the $300,000 in debt service, and I see here it made $325,476. So it's kind of a risk-reward scenario. So are we willing to risk running a golf course for 30 years to make $25,000 a year with everything that could go wrong? The other one in terms of timing is all the rating agencies are coming to Annapolis. So Director Miller and I are taking Moody's, Fitch, Standards & Poor's out, and we're telling them why our credit rating should be upgraded. And just me personally, and you can speak to it, I don't think going to them saying we're going to spend $5 million more on a golf course is going to help our credit rating go up.
I think that remains to be seen. I wouldn't necessarily make that decision. And the risk reward for $25,000, there's also the reward side of the risk factor, that you're going to make more money, not less. But these are all the right questions to be asking. I'm just saying we have a lot of analysis to have the city do, to have before us before we take any steps forward. I would move up on the process, issuing that RFP before we're asked what do we want to do with it, so that we have a real option of what the private sector out there would do with this. You have to have more facts, more information, starting with what the private sector wants to do before we can be asked what we want to do.
We'll certainly make sure that RFP goes out, but I would just urge my colleagues on the council that time is of the essence in this matter. And I appreciate everyone's willingness to work on it quickly. Anything else? Any other questions?
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Personally, it's a pleasure to come back and see the council chamber. It really looks very good. You spent your money wisely here, and good luck to you all.
John, you get to leave at 8 o'clock tonight, though. Not like the old days, right? You get to get out of here early. Thank you.
Again, thank you very much. We appreciate it.
You're up. Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the next item on the agenda?
Mr. Mayor, thank you. We have ceremonial items. I believe there are two of them. The first one is the 100th anniversary of the Walter Mills Pearl Elementary School and the 65th anniversary of the annexation of Pearl into the city. And the second one has to do with swearing in of Officer Mildred Taveras.
All right. If I could have Alderwoman Rhonda Pindell-Charles, representatives from Walter S. Mills Parole and the Greater Parole Community Association, join me at the front. Here's the City Council citation for Walter S. Mills Parole Elementary School. On behalf of the citizens of the City of Annapolis, we are pleased to confer upon you this City Council citation. In recognition of your 100th anniversary We acknowledge that the school was first opened in 1916 and was known as the Little Red Schoolhouse, located at Route 2 and West Street. Years later, the school changed its name to Parole School, a rose-walled school, and moved to the southwest corner of Hicks Avenue and Dorsey Avenue. In 1953, Parole Elementary School moved to 103 Chickapin Round Road, and in 1994, the elementary school was named after Walter S. Mills, a former principal whose lawsuit against the Anne Arundel County Board of Education helped black principals and teachers get equal pay. We gather to celebrate this great occasion and honor those who were responsible for the transition of our beloved school, given under our hand in the Great Seal of the City of Annapolis on this 26th day of September 2016, signed by myself and all the members of the council. Congratulations. Everybody's shy today. Okay. All right.
I would just like to say that we have Mr. Mills' daughter here tonight, Valerie Mills Cooper.
I'd just like to thank Mr. Mayor and the council for this citation. My father was principal at I turned it off. Let me say it again. My father was principal at Parole for 47 years. They don't keep anybody at any school that long. Teachers don't even last that long nowadays. So anyway, thank you very much. Thank you all.
And I'd like to thank the Greater Parole Community Association's executive leadership team. We have a good representative today, as well as Ms. Ginger Henley, who has been recently assigned to Walter S. Mills Parole Elementary School, and welcome to the neighborhood. Thank you so much. Ms. Henley, this is your copy for the school. Thank you so much. And we have one.
Now we have a citation for the Greater Parole Community Association. On behalf of the citizens of the City of Annapolis, we are pleased to confer upon you this City Council citation in recognition of 65 years of annexation. We commend the parole community for annexing into the city on January 1st, 1951. When the annexation was approved, the Community Association was formed and was called the Parole Improvement Association. We acknowledge the name of the association's changed through the years, but even with the changes, we applaud the people who are part of the organization, and this council is proud to stand behind the group, known today as the Greater Parole Community Association, given under our hand in the Great Seal of the City of Annapolis on this 26th day of September 2016, signed by myself and all the members of the council. Congratulations.
Mr. Mayor, next again is the swearing in of Officer Mildred Tavares.
Join me at the front, please. All right, we started a tradition a little while back in Annapolis. Whenever we have somebody new from our public safety teams, we like to come and show them off in front of the council and all the public. So I just want to say thank you for your service. It's not an easy time to be an officer, and we appreciate your service and your commitment to the city. So thank you for stepping up at a time when a lot of people aren't. We appreciate it. If you raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name. Do swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to the state of Maryland and support the Constitution and laws thereof, and that I will, to the best of my skill and judgment, diligently and faithfully, without partiality or prejudice, execute the office of police officer according to the Constitution and laws of this state and the charter and code of the city of Annapolis. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. It goes without saying that we're very pleased to have Officer Tavares join us. Trust me, there's no shortage of work that we're going to have for him when we start tomorrow. I do also want to say, as we stand here today, it marks Lieutenant Brian Antol's 20th year of service with the Annapolis Police Department. Brian Antol runs our SWAT unit, our administrative command, does an excellent job for the community and the citizens of Annapolis, and we're very appreciative of that. Thank you, Brian, for your 20 years.
Mr. City Attorney, would you please present our next item?
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, we are at the point of petitions, reports, and communications, beginning with committee reports.
Is there any alder person that would like to present a report? Alderman Payne.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Economic Matters Committee met last week, September 19th, right here in these chambers, and we dealt with 4 or 5 matters, actually. 3 were reappointments to various committees. We agreed to recommend favorably to the council as a whole with regard to each of the 3. Linnell Bowen, Sarah Phillips, and Robert Clark. There was legislation before the committee, and that was O2916, had to do with refillable containers for alcoholic beverages and the fees connected therewith, and we agreed unanimously to recommend approval to the council as a whole on both of those items.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Alderman Littman.
The Environmental Matters Committee was unable to meet this month, but if you're interested, I would advise to go to the city website or for council members to your iPads for the agenda. There's an updated presentation on the watershed improvement plan that was prepared for the meeting that we weren't able to hold. That WIP will be presented in October. And there was also an update to Forest Conservation Act project updates that was prepared for the meeting. So if you're interested in either of those 2 updates, that information is still available to you on the city's website, and we'll cover those topics in October.
Alderwoman Finlayson.
Yes, thank you. The Public Safety Committee met on September 19th here in council chambers. Chief Priestoup gave us an overview of, or rather the status of body cameras. We're still in the testing stage. We have 3 companies that will be providing us with body cameras for an 8-week period, 24/7. And so we're about to end the first trial period and move to a second company that's going to allow us to test their cameras. We're hoping to move that up on the agenda and not, drag it out any longer than we have to. We had a report from Deputy Fire Chief Simmons on the citywide emergency preparedness exercise that took place in August. The exercise went extremely well, and this time a third level of city employees were allowed to participate. So not only do we have the directors and the deputy directors prepared for emergency responses, but there's also another level of staffing, individuals who are prepared in the event of an emergency. The deputy was joined by Mr. Frank Winter, who is a volunteer with the Amateur Radio Emergency Services. They're the gentlemen who kick in when the power goes out, and we are allowed to stay in contact. So they are very much appreciated by us and our emergency responders. We also heard an overview from Deputy Simmons on the Homeland Security grant that we received. The Finance Committee gave approval to receive that grant. We heard about CPR training. We're in the process of training all city employees on CPR and CPR, and I'm hoping that my colleagues around the dais will also schedule for one of those days to learn CPR. We got an update on the EpiPen, the cost of EpiPen that's been in the news recently, and we learned that our fire department, our firefighters, carry the medication in EpiPens, so that if they come across someone, we don't have to pay $300 or I guess $267 for an EpiPen dosage. They have another means of giving the dosage and at a much cheaper rate. So we're really happy about that. And we are hiring firefighters. The grant to hire 12 firefighters was approved, and so the department is in the process of recruiting. And each of the aldermen is asked to schedule a day in your ward where the fire department can come in and provide information on recruiting locals for our fire department. I've already scheduled my meeting for the 6th of October at 7 o'clock at the Annapolis Walk Community Center. So please spread the word. We're hiring 12 firefighters, and we'd like for them to be from the city of Annapolis. So share it, and my colleagues, I'll help you sign up your date if you need to. And lastly, our next meeting is October 17th, 5 o'clock here in council chambers. Thank you.
Alderman Budge.
Yes, Mayor, members of the council and the public. The Transportation Committee met on September 20th, and we considered several pieces of legislation. O2616, extending hours in parking districts 3 and 4. We recommended favorably with amendments, and we'll be hearing more about that later tonight. 3 resolutions regarding annexation, R21, R23, and R2416. We postponed to allow the Office of Law and Planning and Zoning to conclude their business. Our next meeting is October 18th at 6:30 p.m. here in these chambers.
Thank you. Alderman Kirby.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Housing and Human Welfare Committee meeting was canceled due to advice of attorney that the only 3 pieces of legislation we had had to go through another process, slated to be postponed tonight also, because it has not been through that process. So our next meeting of the Housing and Human Welfare Committee will be at 7:30 on October 18th. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the next item?
Mr. Mayor, next are, I believe, comments from the general public.
During comments by the general public, you have 5 minutes to speak to us about anything you would like. I will say, for those of you who have come out, we're having 8 additional public hearings after this. So if you came here tonight to talk about the Economic Development Division, the Harbor Line at Chester Marina, the Harbor Line at South Annapolis Yacht Center, the WYRE lease agreement, the absentee ballot application, the lease for the boat shows, or composable food waste, those public hearings will be immediately after this. That being said, the first 3 people signed up to speak are Phil Dales, Mike Lavasco, and Robert Eads. And if you could state your name and address for the record, please.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. It's Philip Dales, and my address is 200 Westgate Circle. I'm here tonight to say a few last words about 02216, which is on the agenda later this evening. I know that that's been a long process, and people writing and developing that law, and I agree that it's a very important thing that we get a forest conservation program adopted in the city. But I want to remind you that last week on Thursday, a group of environmental professionals, not developers, not builders, but engineers, foresters, landscape architects, planners, land use attorneys, sent a letter addressed to the council saying that they were concerned about unintended environmental consequences and economic consequences of the bill as it's proposed. That group of people wasn't really a part of the drafting of the legislation and has had to react as the legislation has come into the public and as quickly as possible want to be helpful in addressing any of the issues that they might see from their perspective as those who have the most experience submitting applications under the Forest Conservation Act. I think it's only natural that someone who files the application and looks at all that way will find issues that that DNR may not have found for you and that may not have been as obvious from a government perspective. But it's a long piece of legislation, and as you go through it, each time you'll find new issues. And even just today, as I talked about it with a colleague, I found another, what I think is significant legal question about the ordinance as it's currently drafted, which as of now has your applications, your forest conservation plan being decided by the body that you apply to for the rest of the development. So for plan developments, Planning Commission. For special exceptions, the Board of Appeals. But the land use article is where planning commissions and the Board of Appeals get their authority, and it delegates a limited amount of authority. I'm not sure that the Board of Appeals is authorized to hear a forest conservation plan. And I think these kinds of questions are the types of things that people looking at the legislation from the other side are inclined to find, and we'll be as quickly helpful as we can be. But I'd urge you just not to ignore that letter that was sent last week, and realize that the people who are sending that just look at this from a different perspective and have a lot of experience. So I'd urge you not to take action tonight and to reach out, and I think we can come to good solutions for these problems and remaining questions that are still out there. This thing is different than the forest conservation program in any other jurisdiction in the state. And some of those places where we've decided to be different are okay and fine, but other places that we've decided different, we need to be very careful about not causing environmental harm as well as economic harm. But thank you.
Yes, I have a question or two. As you know, we've been working on this for quite some time. Did any of the members of the particular group that you represent, did they have the opportunity to be heard in the development of this particular plan?
No, I realize the history of this legislation is a little bit more involved than many other pieces, and that there was an initial version that was presented by some aldermen, and then a second version, and then there's this version that was, as I understand it, created by a work group of 4 aldermen. During that process, I actually myself reached out several times to people on the work group and asked to help, and was told that the version of the ordinance wasn't being shared publicly. So at the same time, that I couldn't get access to it, and so later I did get the opportunity to discuss the final version of the ordinance, and as quickly as I possibly could in July and August, which is a slow time of year, as you know, around this town, brought together the group of people who sent in that letter, the group of engineers and architects and land use lawyers who deal with this elsewhere in the state as well. And so I very quickly put together a set of suggestions from that group and sent them into the alderman I was talking to.
Well, have they had the opportunity to be heard prior to the last couple of weeks? I mean, I'm not as concerned that they weren't represented on the committee as I am with perhaps at least the possibility that they don't feel like they had the opportunity to be heard. Not just these folks, but I mean, like it or not, developers and engineers are part of the part of what happens when property is built. It's the people that are, to whom that this is addressed.
There are a few others in the room that could probably answer that for themselves, and I don't want to speak for other folks, but my impression is that people didn't feel that they were, that their views and expertise were consulted by, even after it was drafted, and whether they didn't feel heard, I don't think, no. So I think the answer to your question is no, I don't think people felt like they were heard.
All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Alderman Lippman.
Mr. Dales, the people that you're speaking with, let me start with you. Did you have the opportunity to speak during the public hearing that was held by the City Council?
I think if you're referring to the initial public hearing, I did, and I did
Right,
speak.
and did you have the opportunity to speak when the Planning Commission had a public hearing on this?
At the Planning Commission, I'm not sure that I spoke, but I
You
did
had the
come to the
opportunity,
committee
was my
group,
question.
and yeah, there was an opportunity. The process has been followed. On that note, though, I would suggest that this has been, the amendments that are being attached to this tonight are significant enough that I think there needs to be another public hearing and another opportunity for people to be heard about the version of the bill as it is.
And the amendments that you're talking about that were discussed in July, have you had the opportunity to send any emails to any members of council between July and now?
Certainly, I've communicated to members of the council, but this has been a very late changing process. So some of the most significant amendments that have been made are, for example, the definition of unwarranted hardship was raised sort of at the last hour by the joint committees, and so very quickly tried to come with a good recommendation about that and sent those emails around to those who would listen or who were interested. But that's just my work and my efforts to bring that issue to people's attention, and it was a slow process. I'm not sure how well the full council feels they understand those specific issues.
So I know you follow City Council closely. Have you been a part of any City Council meeting when we had an item up for second reader where there were amendments on the floor just moments before a final vote?
I believe I've seen that happen quite a few times.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, Council members. My name is Mike Klabasco. I'm an environmental consultant with the firm of Wetland Studies and Solutions in Millersville. I'm a qualified professional as per the State Forest Conservation Act, and I've been one since 1996. I'm one of the professionals that also signed the letter that was submitted last week. And I provided comments back to Alderman Budge and the rest of you in August. I've been providing and putting comments together and working with our group since early August on this matter. I've worked on many projects in the city of Annapolis. I know a lot of you are aware of them: Park Place, Milkshake Lane, Annapolis Towns at Neal Farm, and many others. When I submitted the comments, there are some issues that really affect the day-to-day workings of doing forest stand delineations and forest conservation plans. There are some items in here that are way more stringent than in other jurisdictions and make it difficult for us to apply and to make it very workable and practical in the city. There are some conflicts and definitions with the state manual and with some of the language. For instance, the differences between specimen trees and significant trees. And what I'd like to do is urge the council, we need to work together with not only the citizens, but city staff and other consultants to iron out some of these issues. It's a very complicated piece of regulations and language, and we want to make sure we get it right. I'd like to continue working in the city of Annapolis, and I'd like a program and regulations that I find are workable, programs that aren't overly overbearing compared to all the other jurisdictions I work in within the state of Maryland, and also regulations that I think will be ultimately approved also by the Maryland Department of Natural Resources. I think there's some items here that they may have some issues with. So I wanted to come before you tonight and raise my concerns for this. Thank you.
Alderman Arnett.
You are aware that this document has been thoroughly reviewed several times by DNR, and they have approved everything in this legislation.
I am, and the issue is, for instance, with requiring variances for significant trees of 24 inches or greater, and
but they reviewed it. I mean, What you're really asking, and what Mr. Dales is asking for a postponement, is not a few weeks. It is going back through a whole process within the county, going back to DNR, who has already approved what we have come up with. You're talking about a significant delay. I would propose to you an alternative. I read your letter, and I appreciate it. I think that as we have experience with this, we're not going to get it right the first time. There will need to be amendments as we go along, and I think right now what we need to do is to get the main bolus of work in place, start using it, not be there with nothing, and we can refine it. And I think you'll find that the committee and the council members will all be very happy to sit down and work with people, particularly if we experience problems. But we can't just keep doing this over and over and then going to DNR, going through their lengthy process. We'll never have a Forest Conservation Act. It will just always be tweaking and never have it pass. I think that you'll find we're more than happy to listen to improvements, but I think we need to get this in place and start experiencing it. I'm sure we'll find other things that you and Mr. Dales haven't uncovered that are not satisfactory. That's why we have a council, that's why we have a process. We can always fix those things. But it's not just a couple-week delay. This is a major delay. Every time we have to go back to DNR, you're talking about months and months and months. So it's not a 2-week delay. It's a very significant delay. And as I say, they have reviewed our products all along, and they have approved it. We can't do anything without their approval.
And I appreciate that. I'm just concerned that as what gets approved as you move down the ladder, it's going to be difficult to fix or change. That's my concern. All right.
Alderwoman Pino, Charles?
Yes. Mr. Labasco, you indicated that you worked on the Annapolis Towns and Neal Farm.
Yes, I did.
Were you working with Mr. Elliott Powell?
Yes, I was.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Alderman Kirby?
Yes, sir, Mr. Labasco. Alderman Arnett was saying the type of amendments or changes that you would make, would it really entail DNR taking, I don't know how long the process is.
3 months.
3 months or so?
It may not even entail really involving DNR all that much. What I'm proposing, and in my letter, falls more in line with what is being done in other jurisdictions throughout the state of Maryland, making it more in line with that, which are already approved. So.
Okay, thanks.
Yes. Thank you.
I just want to address the final point you made. Anything that we do to change this, any change has to get approved by DNR. So just your comment that you're not sure that any of your suggestions would have to go to DNR, everything has to go through DNR.
Right.
And we've already gone through that process. They
And I
have the
understand.
legislation, they have all the amendments, and they've said, yep, we're ready to approve.
Fair enough. Okay.
I just wanted to address the final point because you said that you weren't sure if your suggestions would have to go to DNR, and that can't be the case.
I understand.
That's all I was trying to make the point. I was trying to argue.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. I'm kind of here today. Got a couple of questions I need to be asked. Number one, I don't know how it slipped past me, but I was told that the goodie buses in the neighborhood, that y'all passed legislation that they can't set in the neighborhood anymore. Am I correct with hearing this? Mr. Arnold Smith has the buses that set down in the Newtown, Robinwood, and Harbor House. I was told that at the end of y'all's last session and before August leaving, that y'all made a resolution of some sort that they can't set in the neighborhoods no longer than a half an hour and can't come back till every 3 hours. Is that correct?
Alderman Budge?
Excuse me.
It is partially correct. Mr. Smith's license issued under the old regulation had the same stipulation on it, that mobile vendors couldn't remain in one place for more than 30 minutes. And that was also in the old regulations. We tuned it. We said that we specified that in the new regulation, we said that the 30 minutes applied 3 times a day. So that we'd been challenged that some people would say, well, okay, I move a foot, or I drive around the block and come back to the same point. So we clarified what the 30 minutes meant.
All right. Because I don't know if y'all realize, first of all, Mr. Smith been 30 years building that business. Not only is it an asset in the community, he doesn't just drain out of any community, he gives back to them all. There are a lot of mothers that go and get food off of that bus and get necessities off of that bus till they get whatever day that they get a little bit of money to pay him. He's there. He's there for the community. There's never been any trouble on his buses. There's never been any problems around his buses, and he gives a lot back to the community. And he helps feed the community and looks out for the community. So I was just thinking maybe y'all need to relook that. That's just my opinion because I just heard that, but I know the impact that this bus has on the community, and actually be able to go somewhere and set a half an hour when you sit and wait for people to come in and out. It's unfair to his business because in a half an hour, I mean, what can you do in a half an hour? I mean, if you go out and really look at what that bus does in the community, it sits there, it provides a necessity. Parents don't have to worry about their children running up across the street or up the street to the Safeway or across the street in Eastport to the Rite Aids and all of that. A parent can feel a little safer knowing that the child just going out to the goodie bus, or a parent can feel comfortable knowing if they don't have money, because we're talking about poor communities, to go up to Mr. Arnold and get some canned goods or whatever he has off the bus until he gets paid. And my personal opinion, I just think that really that's unfair. I mean, we let this man go all this long and nobody ran him away. Now that he's got a business that he's built, all of a sudden it's crashing in on him. I mean, it's like taking your payday away. That's one question I want to ask. Ms. Finley, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to point at you, I'm sorry.
Yes, Mr. Eads, because he's in my ward. I sponsored the legislation several years ago. Didn't have anything to do with Mr. Smith's goodie bus. But that legislation was passed that restricted food trucks, goodie trucks for 30 minutes. So actually, Mr. Smith has been operating illegally for some time. I recently spoke with him about the change that we made last month, or July, whenever it was. And I suggested to him that he create a schedule that he distributes widely through the community so that they know when he's going to be there. And he would have the flexibility to move to different communities. So we understand the value of his service, and we don't want to diminish his ability to make a living in our community. So, you know, we all have to work with what we have. And, you know, the inception of concerns about the buses came from residents. We didn't make it up. So, you know, we're trying to address the concerns all the way around. And I think Mr. Smith can still conduct business even within the parameters of what we've recently set.
All right, I was just, because I had plenty of people from different communities call me about the complaint. That's why I'm here. I knew nothing about it. But I couldn't say, making a schedule saying I'm going to be out here this time or that time. That really works with children, huh? Wouldn't work with children is what I'm saying. You know, I mean, bulk of his money comes from the children and the needs, but to say to little children, I'm going to be here, that just wouldn't work. But that was a question I just want to ask. I have a second question. Well, I'm with you, Ms. Finley, so I can go to you. At the last housing authority meeting I think we were at, and then Security Director Michael Brown brought up the issue about bringing in a police force like they have in the other communities, and Boston was brought up as something you could look at as a role model, and I think you said that you were told or you looked into it and that role model was that didn't work, it was ineffective, and that it wasn't working and they had no longer used that. Is that correct?
Partially.
Yeah.
I happen to have a cousin who's a deputy police chief in Boston.
Yeah.
And he made me aware, and I kind of remembered from spending summers there, that Mission Hill had their own police. But they were actually part of the Boston Police Department. But it was a unit dedicated to Mission Hill. And over time, they saw that that wasn't as effective. And so they have backed way, way off. And they might have 3 officers now that work in that community.
Well,
but that model that is being touted as the best model is ineffective today.
I don't think so, because they just got recommendation for having one of the best public housing police forces in the country. Wow. And that's recent. That's very recent. So why I'm all to bring that up is because it goes back to me now with the housing authority. And seems like everybody that comes into that housing authority who wants to do some right things, they get rid of. Or if they don't go along with certain plans, they get fired. Director Mr. Colbert, recent director, 5 months. I don't know how anybody thought he could change the world. I think he was really treated unfairly.
Mr. Eads, I'm going to have to ask you to summarize. It's been 5 minutes and we have
two additional. Mr. Brown was fired, and it seems like anybody that's trying to do anything good in the public housing is fired. And it goes along with me, with my theory that there's a plan to get rid of public housing. I wanted to ask you, Mr. Mayor, I heard you were going to appoint or submit, I'm going to say submit a new person to go for the Board of Commissioners. And I had a couple of questions I wanted to ask you about him. But I guess you're saying I got to sit down. But all I see it is, and I'm going to say this to go on record, I know a hustle when I see one. I was one of the best hustlers out there. And I see what's coming down the pipe. I would guarantee and bet my money in the next 6 months, Mr. Chip Doherty's going to be running public housing, and you're going to put all of your little boys in. And if each and every one of y'all let him put these developers in their office to get the housing authority, get rid of the housing authority, pretty soon things is going to go, you're going to say it's a failed housing authority, city needs to step in. And when that happens, watch what I said. Housing authority is going to be eliminated. Eastport Terrace and Harbor House, I know what you got in the plan to get rid of them. You can say what you want, but I know what the plan is.
Yes, I will say there is no plan to get rid of the housing authority, and there is no plan that you're talking of. I know you like to say that every meeting, and I know you're passionate. Yeah, because I want to keep going on record so when it happens, people can say, Robert East told you. Right. But I think your issue, you said things are going differently. Things have been running horribly in the housing authority for years. And the people I'm putting on there is
not as horrible as it's running this last few. Not as horrible.
We'll save that debate for another day because there's a lot of history in the housing. But thank you for coming.
Thank you for listening.
The next 3 people signed up to speak are Rick Kissel, Rick Trott, and Stan Newquist.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. Am I loud enough to hear me? Okay, that's good. My name is Rick Kissel. I live at 717 Warren Drive, Annapolis, Maryland. And I'm speaking on behalf of the Annapolis Environmental Commission, of which I'm the vice chair. Paul Murphy, who is our chair, was not able to come tonight, and so I am giving the presentation, or the comments, rather. You all have received these comments. They were sent out around noontime today. along with some backup material, three rather lengthy documents that describe the history of our efforts to work on the Forest Conservation Act. And now I want to thank you for recognizing the importance of the remaining forest in the city of Annapolis and the important service it provides, such as cleaning the air and the water, providing habitat for birds and other wildlife, moderating temperatures, and providing opportunities for recreation and calmness. While we're disappointed that the council did not pass Alderman Littman's prior FCA bill, 032-14, we recommend passage of the version currently before you. As you know, this ordinance has been awaiting passage since before you were elected and has now been through a rigorous review and passed by the Environmental Matters, Rules and Governance, and Economic Matters committees, as well as the Planning Commission. Please do not allow special interests of those who do not want to see any progress on smart growth in Annapolis derail the hard work that has culminated in this important legislation. We urge you and your fellow council members to pass 02216 as amended. Respectfully yours, the Annapolis Environmental Commission. On a personal note, I want to say that I became aware of and introduced to the Forest Conservation Act in 2011, shortly after I became a member of the commission. This followed along with probably the last, it was kind of really a kickstart after the last 20 years or so that I've had interest in the environment. Since that time, it's been a long, long road to get where we are now. And as you know, the Annapolis Environmental Commission, and I know I've put in hundreds of hours on this. Although I did not get everything I wanted, I wholly support and endorse this document as it is amended and as it stands now. Recognize the need for compromise and look for another day to perhaps improve it or change it or whatever. But right now, it's what we've got, and it's a wonderful document. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Alderman Littman. Thank you. Just one quick clarification. The previous ordinance keeps on getting referred to as my ordinance. I wanted to say I had help, and I want to recognize Alderman Arnett, and do we have that? Was there another sponsor? Anyway, Alderman Arnett has been with me side by side on all the stuff, and I don't want him to miss out on any congratulatory input.
Mea culpa. Thank you. Thank you. I don't know how that goes along.
Mr. Mayor, City Council members, my name is Rick Trott. I'm the president of President's Hill Community Association. As Alderman Budge stated just a few minutes ago, on September 20th, 2016, the Transportation Committee recommended favorably for the ordinance 02616. This ordinance is unique and has been through the process of a public hearing on July 11th, 2016. We began this process over a year ago. Many of us in the President's Hill community have put in a lot of time and effort into this, as well as the city. We have the support of many local businesses up and down West Street, and as many of these businesses begin to open, such as the Sailor Oyster Bar, which we welcome, and the Lighthouse Bistro, which opens in about a month, they will start impacting our community. So delaying this vote would not be in our best interest, as we need this relief now for our parking. I ask that you vote on O2616 this evening as submitted by the Transportation Committee on September 20th, 2016. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Alderman, all the ladies. My name is Stan Newquist. I live at 5 Hill Street, Annapolis, Maryland. I'm here alongside with President Rick Trott. I'm Vice President this year. We just really wanted to I've talked to a lot of people this evening that were upset about the fact that this may be postponed because of one person requesting it and for all the wrong reasons. There's been a lot of shoe leather. We've had a whole committee that's gone door to door to every house. We have almost 90% of people signed on the petition to extend the hours. We worked hard with you guys helping trying to revitalize that end of West Street and the Sailor Bar, and now with the bistro opening, they're right there on our corner. So when people come to dinner at the bistro, they're going to come right into our neighborhood, and what we're trying to do is encourage them to use the city parking lots. We have them on both sides. Right now on Sundays, Miss Shirley's, who my wife's favorite spot, but once they open, they got 1,600 spaces underneath and nobody seems to use them. They all come into the neighborhood. So with the extended hours, we'd like them to use the city parking, and because if I come home at 6:30, I don't have a spot. So it's just really, really important. We had a lot of people. We did all the hoops. We did, everything the city asked. We did all our homework. We went every business on that corridor of West Street. We've got 100%, participation there. So I just would encourage you, the O2616, if we could vote on that tonight, because they said if we vote on it tonight, we could get signs up in 45 days, and that would put us right on time. That way, when the new businesses do open, people already see the signs. It sets precedence, and people know to go ahead and find other parking. If we try to change it 6 months down the road, people are getting comfortable. And so anyway, thank you for your time, and I appreciate your vote tonight. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for coming down tonight. We appreciate hearing from you, and I think it will help our conversation.
Alderman Kirby?
Yes, sir. Thanks. We spoke earlier tonight, even before the council. I believe the Alderman Budge, the chair of the Transportation Committee, later on tonight will offer some amendments, but I don't believe it would probably be fair to split the communities on the spot and then vote on it. Right. Simply because as a committee we did meet and brought it back to the full council to leave it wetted. And the intent now is to wet President's Hill out of it, but it would be unfair to do that at this point after public hearings and everything else.
I agree. We've worked together right up to, and for someone to try to change the game like 3 days ago, that's crazy. We've got over a year invested in this. We have a year planning to get to that year, and to try to change it at the 11th and a half hour, that's crazy. So a lot of people put in a lot of time. A lot of you guys put in a lot of time, and that's why I say I really hope this goes through tonight, and I think it's in everybody's best interest.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
The next three people signed up to speak: Jesse Iliff, Elaine Lutz, and Jane Lerner.
Evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak tonight. I'm Jesse Iliff. I'm the South River Keeper here representing South River Federation. I have already emailed you all our thoughts on the Forest Conservation Act, O2216. We support this ordinance. We think that it's important for protection of the remaining forests within the city limits, large acreage of which is within the South River watershed. While initially we expressed reservations about it earlier in the summer, we've had the opportunity to have some dialogue with the council, and a lot of our previous reservations have been satisfied. So while I and others that have spoken before you tonight have noted that there are things that maybe could be tuned up, I strongly urge you all not to let perfect be the enemy of good and to pass this important legislation promptly. But rather than take my time tonight to discuss the things about this legislation that I think are good, I wanted to respond to the letter that you all received from the environmental professionals that I have a copy of as well. It's bookended with representations that we need an ordinance like this and that it should be done as soon as possible, and I agree with those sentiments. I would just note that the perceived harms that are expressed in that letter are unsupported by any specific fact about how this ordinance will diminish interest in development in the city or harm the tax base or how it will contribute to urban sprawl. And I think that had those points been valid, they could have been better expressed and better supported, and I think the failure to do so indicates a relative lack of any substance to those objections. So I just wanted to come and make those notes and thank you for getting this far with this ordinance, and I hope that you'll pass it. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Littman?
Quick point of clarification. Do you represent the South River? Are you the South River keeper or?
Right.
Okay. And so do you and Fred Kelly speak for the same organization?
No, he is the Severn River keeper. I'm the
Severn.
South River keeper.
Thank you.
Yep.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. My name is Elaine Lutz, staff attorney for the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, here in support of the Forest Conservation Ordinance as amended, and also to urge no further delay in passing this legislation. Annapolis is, quite frankly, the only jurisdiction in the entire state that does not have a clear, written, binding forest conservation program that's adapted to the jurisdiction's specific needs. The state law required such an ordinance because each jurisdiction is so different. You can see the problems that we've had in the city due to the lack of a clear, binding ordinance in the city code. It's caused a lot of public concern, a lot of mistrust, a lot of challenges, legal and kind of political, and those could all be avoided if we were all playing from the same playbook. I personally have worked at least 4 years on some version of this legislation, as have many of you. And it seems that every time that we're close to something, there's some 11th hour disruption that sends us way back to the drawing board, back through all the committees, back through DNR, and it's really time to put a stop to that. As has been mentioned, the specific concerns of the environmental or the development community can better be focused on and drilled down upon once we have an actual ordinance in place and we're not looking at the whole 90-page bill every single time an issue comes up. So if we pass this ordinance, which, by the way, it has also been mentioned, has had a public commission hearing, multiple committee hearings, public hearing, to say that anyone has been especially denied access or input is just really not a valid complaint or concern. And to have one group say, we didn't get the opportunity when everyone had the same opportunity would really it would seem to favor one group over the rest of the public, which I think is an appearance that wouldn't really be fair or, good for really anyone involved here. So I encourage you, please, to vote on this ordinance tonight. And then, I think everyone recognizes that there are several areas that might need to be tweaked in the future, but again, each one wouldn't send us back to the drawing board as a wholesale delay would. So happy to answer any questions, and I thank you so much for your time and continued patience throughout this very, very long process. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Pan?
Thank you. Ma'am, why do you think that what's contained in the letter, the complaints that Mr. Dales in particular raised, why do you think they're not valid?
Well, DNR has...
you were on the committee, were you not? Or?
No, I've not been on any committee. I've been involved in the public processes that have taken place and the small committee public hearings that have been held. I'm not saying that anyone's desired changes in the ordinance are not valid. They could be. But DNR is the approving body and has rejected some provisions of the previous ordinances that were unworkable or were too stringent or were too strong of protections, and they have rejected those. And this version has been approved by DNR, so I think that it is indeed workable. Now, whether it's like desirable in every way to everybody, not everything's going to be in the first instance. What I was saying about concerns maybe not being valid is saying that anyone has been shut out of the public process when it's been the same access and input and public hearings for all of us.
Okay, thank you. Alderwoman Finlayson?
Ms. Lutz, the most recent committee that was formed that was not open to the public, if I remember correctly, you were at one or more of those earlier meetings.
I attended I've never been on any work group. I'm not part of the Annapolis Environmental Commission, the AEC. They might have been involved in some of these non-public work groups, but you might be referring to my presence at the three-committee hearing that I and Mr. Dales...
I'm referring to the committee that the alderman set up with the four... Okay, maybe you were not the person there. Thank you.
Oh, and a couple people had to leave, so Dr. Beth Garrity, Bevan Bucheister, and Rob Savage also requested that you oppose the motion to delay the legislation.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Jane Lerner, is she here? All right, the next three people are Deborah Schwab, McLean Smith, and Beth Garraway had to leave, so then Elvia Thompson.
Good evening. I'm Deborah Schwab from 409 Washington Street. I'm in Ross's district. I'm here as a practicing landscape architect, and my business is also in Eastport. And I know you don't want to hear anyone else talking about the Forest Conservation Act tonight, and I do apologize for not being involved in the process earlier. I had personal health issues last year that prevented this sort of thing. And I have no problem with the city enacting a Forest Conservation Act. I do have reservations about some of the writing and what that is going to do when the Planning and Zoning Department have to review the plans that people like myself need to prepare. Just there are some discrepancies in the writing and some jurisdictional overlaps that might create confusion over those first submissions. And I think there's also going to be, I mostly work with smaller property owners, like people who have 1 to 2 acres, and there are a few of the things in the writing that I think might hit those folks a little harder than, you know, I know when you're writing these things, you're usually thinking about the big subdivisions that have the big wooded areas, but this will apply to everyone with an acre and above. And I think there might be some problems that come. I'm just saying, I'm seeing ahead some issues that might come up. And I did put what I thought my issues were in writing if you're interested, and then I won't have to use up your time this evening. Would that be appropriate?
Sure. Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions?
Alderman Arnett?
As I said to the other gentleman, we know that this is going to need tweaking, and
right.
We certainly appreciate input, especially when it's affecting you directly, and we'll get on it. I mean,
right. I'll have the homeowners yelling at me.
Yeah,
they
right.
won't be. They won't be yelling at you guys.
They'll be yelling at me too, but I'll just direct them
Right.
to Jerry.
I will say the definition, though, I'm most worried about, because I know it's been a big issue, is the priority forest. In the definitions, I think I'm going on memory now. I think it says priority forest retention area. In the text, it talks about priority forest. So I think priority forest is not defined, And I think a really good lawyer could make a problem with that. So those are the kinds of things I was trying to bring to your attention. Okay? Thank you.
Good evening. My name is McLean Smith, and I am a resident of West Annapolis in Ward 2. And I'm here tonight to show my concern for the homicides that have occurred this year, inspire the council, and ask some questions. The recent homicides in Annapolis show that energy consumed by risk creates violence. So how do we create a better reality? We channel that same energy into positive trajectories with less risk to yield a better tomorrow. Thus, I urge the City Council to create partnerships with local businesses and middle and high school students throughout the school year and summer, because as a godfather of a 5th grade student at Germantown Elementary, I desire to see the public education system provide work experience, pay its students, and also educate students more about civil and criminal law. So, I may be a really good friend of Dick Israel, and I have some radical ideas about education, but I do want my godson, his sister, and everyone else enrolled in public school to receive more resources than I ever did, so that they are not consumed by the risk that we all experience today. That risk creates negative externalities that are shared by all of society. Thus, I would like to know how the council members how they feel about the violence, what resources the council members are providing to residents of the affected wards to prevent homicides and change lives, and how the council is trying to bring more attention to the issue.
Anyone like to go?
I'll give it a crack.
What?
Thank you for coming forward. I think you're talking about the services that will support the residents, and particularly as we talk about residents who live in public housing. We talk a lot about policing, but we know that's not the answer.
Right.
We know that we need other support systems to help take care of those residents. We have a subgroup of a larger committee right now trying to coordinate support systems. There's a gentleman in the back who's been helping us to recognize the need for psychological counseling services.
That's right.
We know that there are many churches in our community and other civic organizations who do backpack buddies and after-school mentoring and tutoring kinds of programs. It's a huge thing that we're trying to get our hands around, because while some communities are getting a lot of support, there are lots of other communities that aren't getting any. So we're trying to match the communities with the resources they need. But we know that we've got to give all kinds of support to all of our residents. So that's my best shot.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm just really concerned about the children. That's where I think that's where we can make the start. And I don't know. I want people to live in a society where they're not bogged down by all this pressure, and just so that we can slow down, not work so hard, and spend more time with each other.
Well, thank you for caring.
Yes, ma'am. It's on.
Alderman Kirby?
Yes, sir. Sir. Sir, I spend tons of my energies and tons of my time all day, every day, brainstorming and doing the tangible things in the streets with the youth of the city of Annapolis, period, not just Ward 6. Every Saturday I'm committed for a couple of hours with about 5, 6 other professionals with children from all over the city. I won't call them at-risk children, but I'll say they're identified as needing some special types of help to get through a curriculum in school, and they don't fall into traps that makes them hang out on the street corners and get illicit money through illicit ways. It's instances like that, and that group is growing. That group started out with about 4 people. That group is up to about 15, and we've been doing this now for about 2 months, unannounced, no fanfare. Individuals like myself and other professionals just meeting those children for 2 hours. Intern reports came out Friday of last week, was it? Intern reports came out on Friday of last week. 3 of them had the presence of mind to bring them in to group because they had done so well, as opposed to their prior report card. So it's paying dividends. It's on a small scale, but like a ripple in a pond, it can grow. So, but I thank you for coming in. Everyone here shares those sentiments right now, and we've got to do some things differently to get in control of our city and our children. But thanks for coming.
Thank you for the work that you do.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening. I'm Elvia Thompson, 704 South Cherry Grove Avenue. I am president and co-founder of Annapolis Green, and I just want to take a couple minutes to say you've got 3 opportunities to do something good for the environment tonight. One of them is to not delay the Forest Conservation Act bill. You've heard all about it. I'm not going to say anything new about that. I just believe that should not be delayed. You should get on with it, even if it's not perfect. The second one is to approve the lease for the Back Creek Nature Park to the Annapolis Maritime Museum, and I must say I'm a member of the board there. And that's environmental because of all the education that's done about the environment by the museum. 6,000 kids so far on the small campus in Eastport, and that can only grow with the Back Creek Park. And thirdly, there is a bill to not classify people who pick up food waste as waste haulers, because they're not. They're actually makers of fertilizer. This service has done a great deal to take waste out of the landfill. My organization alone has been instrumental in composting probably about 30 tons in the past couple of years, so I urge you to pass that bill. And then finally, on a happy note, another environmental thing is that Annapolis Green is sponsoring the visit of the traditional Hawaiian sailing canoe, the Hokulea, to Annapolis. This is a really big deal. This boat, built in the traditional Polynesian style, is on a voyage around the world. They left Hawaii in 2014 and are navigating around the world with no compass, no sextant, no GPS, just on how they read the ocean and how they understand the stars. So it's going to be here at the same time as the boat show. So a tremendous juxtaposition of modern, sleek technology on city dock with technology that is centuries old at the Annapolis Maritime Museum. So I invite you all and the greater Annapolis community to come to the Maritime Museum October 9th for the arrival ceremony. That'll be at noon to see the Hokulea come in. And we believe that the Stanley Norman will be there as well, another tremendous juxtaposition. So what we're doing is featuring both of these maritime traditions, the ancient Polynesian traditions of the Pacific and our own semi-ancient traditions here in the Chesapeake of maritime navigation and living from the bounty of the sea. And that's it, so thank you very much.
Alderman Littman, thank you. One, we want to congratulate you for the electric vehicle event that you created or sponsored just a week or so ago, and 2, along those lines, thank you, Mr. Mayor, for proclaiming that to be Electric Vehicle Day in a timely fashion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ray Sullivan. That was the last person signed up to speak. If anybody else would like to come forward, now is your opportunity.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, my name is Anthony Clark. I'm addressed at 2001 Warner's Terrace North, Annapolis, Maryland 21401. I'm here tonight in support of Ordinance 0-41-16. I'd like to thank Alderman Littman and the Mayor for co-sponsoring this bill. I think it's a good addition to the city and very important. And I want to make you feel good about it in one way by quoting some of the items in the 2016 Annapolis Economic Development Strategy Action Plan, which part of Goal 3 says move toward a green Annapolis. And in it mentions, in addition to Annapolis should continue to increase its number of green buildings, reduce the city's carbon footprint. And it also mentions in Part 3, encourage the development of new and emerging industries, especially those that are clean and green, in order to diversify the local economy and support the city's green goals, as well as supporting the Annapolis Environmental Stewardship Certification. Now, I may be taking a little bit of liberty in some of those definitions, but the real point of it is the company that does the composting, I'm a co-owner of Galway Bay here in Annapolis as well, and we've been using veteran compost for almost just over 4 years now. All our food waste, as well as Harry Brown's and Bochard Bar and Grill and Eastport, have been working with Veterans Compost, and inside our kitchens we separate all our feed waste and they pick all this up every week. It's a great addition to the city and as an environment, but the point of what they do is not waste hauling, and this was an important point to make for them. They're not waste hauling, they take it all away, and I've been to their plant in Aberdeen, and all of the waste is heated. It doesn't smell like everybody thinks it does, but they actually turn this into compost, and they can sell this compost at a very good price. It actually turns into a very good product that most gardeners want to purchase. So it's a good thing. Thank you very much for doing that, and that was it. Thank you very much. Okay.
It was my pleasure to sponsor it with Alderman Lippman, so thank you for the green initiative you take on. Alderman Budge?
Yes, and I would like to point out that with Mr. Clark's and Mr. Romo's initiatives, 100% of the restaurants in the Maryland State Circle Business Association compost and recycle all of their waste. And I'd like to thank you for the efforts you're putting into it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to come forward? Now is your opportunity.
Good evening. Peace and love. My name is Darius A. Stanton. I'm a resident of Bowie, 3313 Dunwood Crossing Drive. But I do own property in the city of Annapolis, so I have a vested interest, in addition to the fact that we conduct a number of programs and support organizations here in the city of Annapolis in and around youth development and human development in itself. My concern tonight, ladies and gentlemen, is the issue that we're having, which I would call a human service crisis. Right now in the county, there's been over 400 heroin overdoses. At least 60 of those, actually 60 of those overdoses have been deaths, resulted in death. In addition to that, tonight we've had our 9th homicide here in the city of Annapolis. And that now, I believe, is one shy of what could be a record in the city of Annapolis, at least for the last 20 years. I'm not exactly sure of that, but I'm pretty close to it. I served as a drug czar here in the city, so I have a little bit of history with regard to that. In addition to the homicides and the drug overdoses, one of the greatest challenges that we have is right now there just seems like a real lack of communication. I sat in a meeting last week with the chief of police and a county official, and the county official, which we worked a really good strategy in terms of being able to provide crisis intervention, because as you know, after these shootings take place, unfortunately, the young people and the adults in these communities really have had no real crisis or therapeutic treatment as a result of these incidents. And if right now I was to go out in the middle of this floor and stomp a dog to death, everybody here would need some type of therapy the next day, because you watched it and it just went away. But unfortunately, our young people are expected to go back to school. The people who live in those communities are expected to just go back and go on with their lives each and every day without any therapeutic treatment. And so we expect the people and the children that are living in these communities to continue to go on without any real support, and I mean direct, immediate care. Now, fortunately, what we did work out, thanks to the chief, I like to give credit where credit is due, a plan that will bring therapeutic services immediately into the community following that. We're working on some private institutions and some other organizations to provide some additional support. But right now, that's one of the items that are on the table. So the chief did let me know tonight that there will be a crisis team that will go out to the community surrounding the most recent shooting tonight. But it's a real issue. So the third thing I wanted to bring to your attention is just, there's a significant amount of human service agencies that are doing a lot of work. There are a lot of meetings taking place. But the coordination between the county and the city around this issue, in my opinion, is not doing a good job. And I say that because the individual I was in the meeting with, and I don't want to put them on the table because I don't think it's fair to them. The reality is, though, they were unaware there was 8 homicides. Now, there's nowhere in the world any county official should not be aware, any leading county official, especially when it's tied directly to this issue, is not aware. And they were not aware, and that's really unacceptable. But what it speaks to is the fact that it's not impacting everybody, and so because it's not impacting everybody, it's not a hot topic. Any business that I run, any organization that I chair, we have 15 minutes in the beginning of every meeting called hot topics. And those hot topics are things that are either we need to address right away, that's impacting our financial bottom line or our human resources. So I urge the city to bring this to the table with the county as a hot topic. Economic development over the last 10 years, when the nation really had an economic downturn, one of the industries that maintained consistent growth was the human service industry, nonprofits. Okay, now it's for a lot of reasons. Churches are a major part of that, colleges and universities, of course. But my point is, we need a consolidated effort. And so my recommendation to the council is that we establish a human service master plan. We do capital planning, and we address the capital needs of the city and the county, but do we address the human needs? And so a human service master plan will focus on mental health, which would definitely address the treatment issues that we're dealing with across the board in the county and the city. A lot of the folks that are coming into the city that are buying these drugs are not city residents. The majority of the homicides that have taken, not the homicides, but the overdoses that have taken place in the county, but a lot of those drugs are coming from the city. And so the human service master plan would address mental health. In addition to that, youth development would be addressed because we need a concerted effort. Right now you have hodgepodge programs, there's no real teen activity, there's no real teen programs. I'm a native Annapolitan. When I grew up in Annapolis some 35 years ago, there was a skating ring, there were 3 arcades, there were 2 movie theaters, and today you have 2 movie theaters in downtown. That's it. So as a matter of fact, even the rec center downtown was opened up as a teen club. So Mr. Mayor, you probably attended that yourself. So there are a lot of opportunities that young people had as teens that no longer exist today. The last component to the Human Service Master Plan really would focus on economic development, education, and job growth, and really preparing and training our young people and our communities so that they will be prepared not for just what people want, but the industries that are peaking and that are in demand today. So that's my recommendation. I appreciate your time and effort, but I do urge you to really focus on creating a stronger communication and a much more urgent action with regard to addressing the issues that are plaguing our city.
Alderman Arnett.
Thank you. This isn't the first time we've heard about Human Services Master Plan, and it seems like a good idea, but I think we need a little more flesh. Is there something you've written or others have written that could give us an idea of what this would be and how we would make it happen?
I'm sure. One of the greatest examples is the Harlem Children's Zone. The Harlem Children's Zone basically identified about 20 square blocks, and in that 20 square blocks, that program was implemented, and it just brought to bear a number of resources, both public and private funding, addressed the schools, seniors, as well as young people. Jeffrey Canada is the author of that plan. It's been adopted by the White House. That's a great example of what could be done with regard to that. So we do have some other options, some other resources that are existing on the table. So yeah, we did, you're right, I did bring that up again, the first time at the public safety hearing, but I did want to make sure that it was reintroduced to the full council. So yeah, we could definitely provide some follow-up with regard to that.
I'm just trying to think with my colleague, would that be under public safety? Where would we house that initially?
It could be, I don't know.
I mean, I think it's something we need to explore. I don't know.
I think we
how
may
to
want to
get-
create a separate committee of the council to work on creating this plan.
Mhm.
And I'd be willing to.
If you
work
could
on that.
get us any information, it would be helpful that we could start noodling around on it. That would be very helpful.
I would suggest housing and human welfare, the second component. We often think of it as the housing committee, but it's also human welfare.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, but it's worth, we should pursue it.
Mr. Stanton, thank you for coming again, and thank you for reminding us of the needs. In light of the recent homicide this afternoon, has our plan been put into place to send in representatives from the health department today to serve the community? Do you know?
Yes, ma'am. So as a result of the meeting we had last week, the chief did call, make preparation for the mobile crisis team to go in with the police staff here in the city. And the school system is also going to now, as a result of the work that we've been doing, to make sure that the schools that are impacted, which would be Bates Middle School, of course, Annapolis High School, I'm not sure the feeder school of the elementary school, but that school also, those three schools will also have the needs addressed in the school, and so that it's on the school system's radar as well.
We do not have a rapid response team. That's a function of the county health department.
That is
and
correct.
Mr. Stanton has been instrumental in making the connections with our city staff, our department, our police department and fire department, so that when our public safety team is called out, they know in turn to reach out to the health department to request those services. So thank you very much. And I hope that if we do create, whether it's the Housing and Human Welfare Committee or whatever committee is going to take this up, that you would be a willing participant with us.
Sure. Thank you for the invitation. I do want to say I think it's important, as I had the pleasure of being able to listen to the conversation around the golf course, that we just maintain our priorities. Excellent point, Alderman Kirby, with regard to the county and the city owning that property. I also work for two county executives, so I have a sense of the county and the city and the jostling that takes place. But we do have a priority, and the priority is human life. And so we need to make sure that we address that across the board from all of the wards. One of the key components to the challenge right now, and the reason being if there's an incident that takes place in the city, the county has the resources, and so they have 3 teams that would respond. But they can only respond if there are no incidents taking place in the county. If there's an incident taking place in the county will respond as soon as they possibly can, and they're doing a great job. However, the county has an enormous amount, I mean, they're 5 times the amount of people here in the city? More than that, significant. And so the solution or the potential opportunity on the table is to have the city cover at least half of the time of a counselor or someone that could respond within the city. So instead of necessarily hiring somebody to be a crisis response person for the number of incidents that we do have, at least we'd have somebody that we would be paying into so that they would be able to provide their service and not be at the beck and call or necessarily at a pecking order with regard to the county and the issues that they have. Thank you.
Yeah, and I just want to say thank you too. And Alderman Lippman is right. Housing, human welfare. I look at it all the time. I know one thing: state, city, and county collectively are all in agreement that we do have this substance abuse problem. But if 8 people walk into We Care and Larry Griffith tomorrow, we can't house them. We've got to send them to Connecticut and all over the place. Mental health has suffered. There's a dearth of mental health services in Annapolis and Anne Arundel County, period. And everybody knows it, and nobody does anything about it. So if we can have cooperative agreements to that extent, Their building's sitting right up there at Crownsville, still unsold to anyone. I mean, the forces and the powers that be need to collectively come together and put them to use. And I think that would be a great start. But thanks again for coming out. Keep raising consciousness, because that's the only way we're going to get it done.
Well, and you know, the unfortunate thing is that Annapolis will eventually catch a significant black eye, as well as the county. And so eventually it'll start to impact the economic capacity of the city, because we attract a significant amount of international and national events. And people pay attention to crime, and people pay attention to severe violent crime. And today in the news, it said that the homicide took place in downtown Annapolis. Now, we know that in Annapolis is not necessarily considered downtown, but the rest of the state doesn't. And that was on one of the major networks. My point being, unfortunately, we have to raise that because it just gets people's attention. But it is going to eventually impact that. And so we do need to look at, while we have the opportunity and the great relationship that the mayor has with the county and the governor. I mean, it was the same day, and the governor was at the yacht club saying that, you know, we were going to refund and make sure that the yacht club was rebuilt. So that's the kind of response that we need for human life.
And one more thing, I called the crisis hotline when the Broadnick student was murdered in Robinwood, simply because I knew children were at bus stops. And so I called the crisis hotline, and I know somebody from the school department called me and asked me what schools were involved. But I don't know if we have a system. Is it responsibility of the police department or whomever to do that? I know I did it, and can't even recall how I got the number. But once I called them, the school department did call me back and ask me what schools were involved,
Right.
which they probably should have known, because elementary, high school students go certain places in that community.
Exactly.
So.
And what's happening now, unfortunately, as a result, the way that the homicides, and I'm not sure if this recent homicide is tied to the other killings that have been taking place, but unfortunately what's happening now throughout all of the city schools is you have the middle school and the elementary school students who are now siding up with the community and talking about the homicides as if they were part of their community or their immediate family, and it's not even directly connected. But as you all know, children want to be apparently in the know. And so they start calling out names of the young people who were either involved in the shootings or who were killed themselves, and they're taking that on at the elementary school level. So it really is something that's impacting everybody's ward. And by addressing it and bringing it to the forefront, you have an opportunity to do it. And one of the things, I think there's a commission meeting on education coming up. And I know Wally H. Bates' curriculum is going to be one of the things that's going to be brought up at that meeting. But also, I think the opportunity to address what you just brought up, Alderman Kirby, which is to make sure that those schools are immediately brought into play, because they did do an excellent job responding at Broadneck. And so you're to be commended for that, because they brought a number of resources to the school for the entire day. And it really addressed it. So it does make sense to make sure that the school system is tied in, because we alerted them today, but it may not always happen, but it needs to, because all of us have either children or someone related to in our families with children, and if there was a homicide or a murder in their neighborhood, and their school members were affected. I mean, these children were there. It was 3:30, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So you had children that were literally either passed by the police, something, heard the shots, that's trauma, and it needs to be addressed. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Virginia Riker. I live at 315 Carriage Run in Annapolis, and I just want to second that gentleman's comments, and I sort of feel like my comments now are going to be a bit lightweight. And most of what I have to say is going to be cut very short because it was said by others this evening. But I'm here to really encourage the council to pass the FCA ordinance as you've proposed it, to vote on it this evening. And one of the main reasons I do that is because I've been working on a film called The Politics of Trees. And I've been following this for several months actually, and digging into the history of this. And Annapolis has had a deficient FCA program for years. And that's going to be highlighted in my film. But in addition, with Judge Paul Harris's recent decision on the appeal that the citizens weren't going to have a right to speak up on a particular project, it just reinforced the fact that we don't have an FCA that is tailored to Annapolis. Now, the proposal that is before you tonight is not perfect. Environmentalists have complained about it. Developers have complained about it. And as an attorney I used to work for used to say to me, he said, well, if both sides are unsatisfied, it must be a good compromise. It's got room for improvement, and I really take exception to the developer's letter and their comments this evening that they did not have a right to comment on this legislation. And as it's been pointed out, they had every opportunity in all of the hearings that the citizens have had a right to speak. They've had a right to speak as well. So that sort of falls by the wayside in my mind. But in addition, they made the specific comment that this legislation would discourage investment in the city of Annapolis and its tax base and promote sprawl and impervious surfaces. Now, to me, this is either ignorance or a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer because, part of the point of the legislation is to prevent stupid investments that don't further smart growth in Annapolis. Smart growth includes preserving our environmental resources to the full extent of the law, which is very convoluted in Annapolis today, so let's clarify it with the ordinance tonight. The second part of it is ignorance, the point that it would discourage investment in Annapolis. It would not discourage investment. Back behind all of these developers who are waiting to develop now is a whole second tier of developers. There will never be a shortage of developers who want to develop in Annapolis. But it's up to the legislature to protect the city residents from overdevelopment, over-densifying the city. Increasing the density of the city without doing the additional research and providing the necessary infrastructure and resources is going to lead to more problems like the gentleman before me was discussing. So while the FCA is really specifically tailored toward trees, it does have a greater impact on the entire building process in Annapolis, and I encourage the council to pass the ordinance this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. That concludes comments, petitions, reports, and communications are now closed. We're going for 2.5 hours. We'll take a 10-minute break, and we'll meet back here after that. The City Council is now back in session. Mr. City Attorney, would you please present our next item?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Next on the agenda is your update.
All right. I have some good news for everybody. As you know, there's been a lot of turmoil going on with HACA. We've had resignations and a number of other things, and I'm happy to announce that we have a new board member I'm nominating. And so I'll just tell you briefly about this gentleman today. His name is John Dillon, and I'm appointing him for the vacant seat on the HACA Board of Commissioners. Mr. John Dillon is a resident of Annapolis and the founder and former president of Trillis, a nonprofit organization in Los Angeles, California, responsible for empowering men and women to find jobs and gain access to safe and affordable housing. It was named Nonprofit of the Year in 2012 and has purchased, financed, renovated, and managed affordable housing for low-income men and women, helping thousands find jobs in the Los Angeles area. I thought that was extremely important. Every person I appoint to the board, I try to find a different diversity and skill set. I think having somebody who's in the affordable housing industry that has this will be excellent. I know Mr. Dillon is serious about finding solutions to the problems and the problems of our residents in HACA and deal with them on a daily basis. John leads by example and will not only use his past knowledge to help our residents, but will also use his extensive financial and managerial experience to help HACA administrations create a financially sound environment for its day-to-day operations. John Dillon is a member of the Board of Directors for the Community Preservation and Development Corporation. He served as its finance chairman during his 20 years with the organization. CPDC works to provide safe, high-quality, affordable housing to low and moderate-income individuals and has renovated and operates the Wiley H. Bates Heritage Park Apartments, which I think is also important that he has local knowledge dealing with the city of Annapolis already. Mr. Dillon is the current owner and president of management firm located in Annapolis and Bethesda, Maryland, which helps clients plan their financial future. He will fill the seat of Jeffrey Henderson, whose term expired in July. And that concludes my update. I would just ask if the council and the committees could take this up rather quickly. I would appreciate that in his nomination. Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the next item?
Okay, Mr. Mayor, next we have some reappointments of members of the Ethics Commission, the Heritage Commission, and the Historic Preservation Commission, 5 altogether.
All right. Is there a motion to approve the reappointment of David Blyden to the Ethics Commission?
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Is there a motion to accept the reappointment of... Okay.
Second.
Well, before we do that, let's recognize the people in the audience that are here so they can get some TV time. I see Linnell Bowen. Is there anyone else? Can't see back that far. Robert Clark left. Okay. Well, I'm going to read their names anyway. Linnell Bowen to the Heritage Commission. Sarah Phillips to the Historic Preservation Commission.
Yes.
Okay. And Robert Clark to the Heritage Commission. And there's been a motion to accept the rest of them in block. Is there a second?
Second.
That's all 4, right?
That's all 4, correct?
No.
We already did the first one.
the first one.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? I'm sorry, Ms. Bowen, you had to wait this long for it. We're still on page 1 of the agenda, but thank you.
I think she gets a hand for
Yeah, for being here, for sticking it out. You know what? You want to plug Maryland Hall since you stayed here the whole time? Anything new and exciting going on? I'm serious. You can come forward. Good time. Anything you want to say or any exciting things coming up?
They all do a good job, and I always learn things when I come here.
Good.
Thank you for teaching.
Yep.
Being the good teacher
Thank you.
she is.
Mr. City Attorney?
Mr. Mayor, next is the consent calendar. There's several first readers and second readers, and there's also GA-9-17.
Is there approval of the consent calendar? Took the words out of my mouth. Is there a second? Madam City Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Panelidis?
Aye.
Alderman Pfeiffer?
Aye.
Alderman Arnett?
Aye.
Alderman Bud?
Aye.
Alderman Payano?
Aye.
Alderwoman Pendel Charles?
Aye.
Alderwoman Finlayson?
Aye.
Alderman Littman?
Aye.
Alderman Kirby?
The ayes have it. Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the next item?
Next, Mr. Mayor, our business and miscellaneous items. There's 3. The first one has to do with the processing of the 2017 primary and general elections, and the next two have to do with council work session dates and council meeting dates.
Is there a motion to approve ID 32616, administrative processing of the 2017 primary and general elections?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
So just clarification so everybody knows, in terms of outsourcing this, we can certainly take a vote on it and everything, but as the city attorney alluded to earlier in conversations we've had, it's a contract, so historically in the past for contracts, the council members have to sign on. So at the end of the meeting, we'll pass it around, and anyone who wants to sign on to it can do so at that time. Alderwoman Finlayson?
Yes, and now's the time to ask questions about it. In the past, the county handled our elections, and they stopped handling our elections because of some monetary issues. How are we being assured that at some point we won't get a bill, since our elections cost well over $200,000, and we don't have a tax cap, the county has a tax cap, and it appears as if they are simply going to give us this $200,000+ worth of service for free.
They want the golf course.
Excuse me, they want the golf course? Only if they fix it up. So I'm concerned that at some point there's not going to be a bill attached to this.
So there's two things, and I'm glad you asked that question. The first is, this just deals with the upcoming election, the primary and the general. Doesn't deal with any ones in the future. We're responsible for it. The second thing is, Gary's gone back and forth a lot. Once we sign this contract, and it says that they're paying all the costs, they can't go back on their words and do it. I think the county executive is very sincere in what he's done in the past, which is $173,000 in transportation money, went up to $250,000, $500,000, and then $750,000. So the county's given us money on a number of occasions, and they feel as though they can run it, I mean, not just more efficiently, but also bear the financial costs. I think it's hard to turn down the money.
Well, how can we be assured that the next time we ask for transportation funds, we get zero? Because they've got to offset the cost of this election. And you said this just impacts the current election. You're talking the 2017 election, correct? So how do we be assured that they don't take it out of somewhere else?
All I can say is, I think it's a conversation the county executive would have. They have the money to fix up the golf course. And this, I can't speak to the future. Certainly 3-4 years from, well, in terms of this, they're signing a legal document, so they can't get out of it. But I don't think anybody can guarantee and say, even from the city's point of view, there's no way we're going to be able to predict everything that's going to happen 3 years in the future. So theoretically, could they come back and cut transportation or somewhere else? I guess that's a possibility. I don't think it's a likelihood, though.
Is it a discussion that's been had?
I've talked to him, and he's never indicated to me that if we're getting money in this one, we're going to lose money somewhere else. So that's never come up.
My other question is about what is specified in our city code as far as our elections are concerned. Is the county committed to holding our elections based on our city code as opposed to county standards?
That's 100%, and I'll let Mr. Elson speak to it. And the most important part is our elections board that we nominated is the final say. It's kind of like you hire someone to do it for you. They still have the final say on everything that happens.
I'm sorry. Do you want me to address that?
Sure.
On the issue of the money, I mean, the MOU is binding on both parties, and the MOU has no cost to the city. The MOU does say that the city will advance the payroll for the judges, but we have another document by which the county executive and the county attorney have agreed to cover that bill. So it is a zero bill. We will not be getting a bill from the county.
What's the cost of the payroll?
The payroll is estimated at between $40 and $80,000.
Between
Based-
40 and 80?
Yes, based on the last election. They estimated at possibly 80,000, but they came in high on just about everything, purposely, so that it would be clear that that there would be money available. But our payroll at last election, I think the finance office gave us some documentation that indicated it was closer to 40,000 for the judges. In any event, we have written confirmation from the county that they will cover that bill. So the election is free to the city. A lot of the money, or a lot of the time that will be spent by the county will be during the ordinary day of staff persons there. They have about 25 staff persons, and they will be working on city elections as well as county elections during the day. So a lot of the labor, or the cost of labor, will be subsumed during the day by county employees who are working during the day anyway at that time. They are agreeing to pay overtime for us. I think the overtime was estimated to be about $40,000 in wages. And then they have also agreed to pay the election judges, and then they've agreed to pay for what we call materials and supplies. The total cost they estimated to be under $200,000, about 170 or 80, I think it was. At any rate, we have this would be a binding contract between the county and the city. The next thing that you asked about was our election law. Our election law still governs this election. We are not adopting county election law for this election. So, and the city code section says that at any time that we delegate by contract an election, or the processing on election to the county, that we can't delegate legal responsibility for the election. In other words, that our Board of Elections will still be responsible for making legal decisions, for enforcing the code, and our staff in the election office downstairs will have minimal responsibilities. If someone walks in during the day, wants an application for an absentee ballot, wants help filling out the application, wants to vote in our office downstairs, they can do that. The intent is that absentee ballots be sent to a P.O. box addressed in Annapolis, and there'll be courier service between the post office box and the county. Anyway, during the work session, members of the county staff came in here and gave a pretty good explanation as to how they will be helping us. So no staff will be affected by this. No voter will be affected by this. We'll still have voting precincts. Our precincts remain the same. Our polling places we're working on, they'll all be in Annapolis. Hopefully, just about all of them at the same place. Some are going to change. So, I think I spent a lot of time working on this, and and I think we've got it to the point where we have a very good MOU, and it's something that's very financially beneficial to the city.
Unfortunately, I had to miss the last work session when they had their presentation, so forgive me for my question.
No problem.
In the past, our city clerk has had an intimate role in
That's
elections. Will she still have a role in overseeing?
She will. The county will handle what we call the processing of the election. She's still our election administrator. She acts as our election administrator. Her responsibilities for this particular election and no other election under this MOU, many of those responsibilities would be handled by the county. She still runs the election office for the city, and we already had 2 people come in, declare their candidacies. We handle that. We transmit. When we have business in our election office, we do that business and then we transmit it to the county. So if someone comes in and declares their candidacy, we do the work down there. Regina or Hillary will do the work down there. Sometimes Cindy substitutes for them, and then we simply transmit it to them so that they know for instance, who is going to go on our ballot and in what order. But work is being done in the city election office. Again, with absentees, many of them will be mailed to the post office box simply for convenience, because they will have a courier daily pick up absentees at the mailbox, at the post office box. But there's going to be probably quite a few people who vote at the election office, and we'll handle all of that. We handle their applications. We're still involved in voter registration too, and we're involved at election night. The staff will be involved in handling that. I know I'll be there. I'm not sure what anybody else's role is going to be at this point. So I think that what we have here is simply a transfer of processing for us. We're operating under, as I said, under the same law, and we are responsible for legally enforcing the law still, and the Board of Elections in the city is responsible for certifying the election and making decisions of a legal nature at canvass. And if there was a recount, for instance, our board would be doing that too.
Will our election judges be required to drive to Glen Burnie after on election night?
Well, the chief judges, I think, go down there. There's 2 chief judges at every polling place. Yes, they will be going down there election night to deliver the materials that they have. That's one of the things. The county has all of the equipment there, and the whole setup is running from there. So yes, there will be some transportation involved where election judges, the chief judges, would be going to the County Board of Elections on primary night and election night.
And you and Regina will be, or I'm sorry, the city clerk will be in Glen Burnie to oversee this process?
I know I will be, and I know that I want Gina there. I hope she will be there. I would like her there because she's our expert on election law here, and I would like her there on primary night and election night, and canvass too. The canvass would be conducted in Glen Burnie because they'll have all the ballots there, they'll have all the absentees and the provisionals there. They're going to do the hands-on. They'll just put them in piles for us, and then our Board of Elections will handle the decisions on the provisionals, and if there's any problem with any absentees, our election board is the final arbiter in the election of the absentees too. They're just doing hands-on for us down at the county. We're still involved in enforcing the law and making legal decisions, and they can't do anything without our permission. We do have roles and responsibilities set out, which are an exhibit in the agreement or in the MOU, and we spend a lot of time working with that and making sure that we know who's doing what. So I think it's a really, it's a good opportunity for us, and it's a good opportunity, I think, for city-county relationships and associations. I think, we're clearly trying to work with the county, and the county's, being very generous with us on this, and, I just think it's a great idea.
Well, one last follow-up. You
Sure.
just said that you want Regina, or I'm sorry, our city clerk with you.
Mm-hmm.
If she is in charge of our elections, I would think that it would be mandatory, not just, I want her with me. But
I
she should
have
be-
already talked to her about being down there with us. I've kept Gina, the city, I've kept the city clerk aware of what's going on. We're just starting to meet weekly now. Hillary, Gina, and I, to make sure that we're not overlooking anything, and just to talk each week, spending maybe 30 or 60 minutes in our office. We had to cancel the first one because I had to be somewhere else, but I think that, as an election administrator, yes, Gina should be there, and she should be involved in the decisions that we have to make legally. I will consult with Gina. She's more of an expert on it than I am, and I rely on her quite a bit for during elections. So I expect Gina to have a prominent role in on election night and primary night, and then the routine role during the elections. The thing that's going to change is that they're going to do our daily routine, I guess you could say, organizing for us and keeping things, organized, as I said. And if you look at the roles and responsibilities, you'll see what they're going to do for us. We essentially transmit all of our information to them. They collate it, they organize it, and then, they will count the votes on election night, primary and general, and they will do the hands-on work for us on the canvas. I think you're scheduled to go down there tomorrow, is that right? Yeah. I think who else is going with you? Alderwoman Pindell-Charles. So I think that you'll get a very good idea and have a good perception of what the county can do for the city. I've been down there many times. I've seen their organization down there, and it is, I think, top notch. All they do down there, the election office, is election work. It's not like the law office where that's just one of our responsibilities. They have a 25-person or so election staff there that handles nothing but elections. So I anticipate it will benefit all 9 of you.
Thank you.
Alderman Bunch.
Yeah, I want to add that I've been had some conversations with the chair of the Board of Supervisors of Elections. One of their concerns that I know that the city attorney and company have been working out is transportation between here and Glen Burnie. Questions like the election judges, the chief judges that have to get up, how is that going to work? Not necessarily all of them will have cars, so may provide transportation. Making sure we work out all those details in advance so that it does work smoothly.
Right.
And so that it is an Annapolis election.
Mm-hmm. Right. We have actually discussed the transportation issue for training of judges and the chief judges having to go to Glen Burnie on election night, and that's still something that we have not yet pinned down, but we are discussing providing transportation so that anyone who needs it will have it, and that we try not to inconvenience them any more than just having to make a trip down to Glen Burnie and back.
Tom's nodding his head saying, yes, we have the money, so thank you, Tom. Alderwoman Pindell-Charles?
Yes. I'm looking back on my notes, and I do recall when Mr. Torrey came here for the work session, the first question that I asked him was, I was very concerned about the respectability that we will receive from the county. Our staff, the city clerk, and everyone else. Will we be respected when this process proceeds? We don't want to be kicked in the corner or treated like a stepchild. That was my concern, and I indicated that was the first thing I indicated to Mr. Torrey the last time. So that's where my angst may come from.
Right, and I remember you talking about that, and I've been at the last 2 meetings of the Board of Elections, City Board of Elections, and have answered their questions along with the help of Gina, and then Hillary was at the most recent meeting, and Mr. Smith, and mostly Mr. Smith, but the others expressed concern about making sure that we're not inconveniencing city voters. And city voters will not be inconvenienced. It'll be like voting, just like they normally do, hopefully at the same polling place. I think we have about 10 confirmed that we had in 2013 right now. Do you know? I think it's about 10. We're going to work on Mount Moriah at the request of Alderman Kirby. They have a ADA problem there, but we're going to go down there and see if we can figure out how to handle that. So I don't think any city voters are going to be inconvenienced. It will be like voting at any city election. The inconvenience, if any, will occur with the election judges, I think, and we are working on transportation for them. Yep.
Follow up about the election judges. We've had some pretty die-hard supporters as far as our elections are concerned. People who've been judges for years and years and have dedicated. Are they being asked to continue in that role, or how are the judges selected?
Well, I'll be working with county staff in making sure that any city judges who have previously served or those who indicate they would like to serve but haven't previously served are given recognition and given priority in serving. We should have any persons who have done a good job in the past, who are city residents, continue to be election judges. It makes sense for city residents to be election judges in the precincts where they reside, and it would be kind of illogical, I would think, to have county residents come up to the city when we have our own city residents who are available. So my position, and I think the county understands this, is that we will give priority to our residents for the judge positions. Now, we may not fill them all with city residents. It's unpredictable right now, but I think it's very clear that from the work session that we don't want to show disrespect to our residents, our voters, but this is something that has come up where it's a benefit to the city financially, and so I think we have a good deal with the county, and I trust the county, our counterparts in the county, to do a good job. I've gotten to know them over the past 3 months or so and worked with them on quite a few days at this point to get to where we're at now. I've actually gone down there 4 or 5, maybe half a dozen times at this point, working with them, spending days down there getting this all together.
Thank you.
Any other? Alderman Kirby?
Yeah, I'm just having a whole bunch of problems with this whole thing. If in fact the county can plant grass seed on a golf course in 50 years, but all of a sudden they're going to run an election for the city of Annapolis, for nothing, for no money at all. I mean, there's something wrong with that picture. Look, I heard this guy say that they were going to hire election judges. Code says, Section 408.050 provides that the board shall appoint judges, as provided in Section 1C. How does the county hire judges if our board does it?
Our county will not hire our judges. They have a list of many, many judges. I think they hire, I can't remember, it's a huge amount of judges that they hire in an election, whether it's presidential or just congressional elections or local elections. They have a list of very good judges, but I think it's clear that our board and our council does not want to exclude city residents in the position of judges, election judges, and there's still a lot to do, to make sure that things go smoothly. I think we're at a stage right now where I feel comfortable that I can work with the county, our counterparts over at the county, and as long as I, express the concern that the county has and that the board has about showing respect towards our city residents, I think that we shouldn't have any problem. I think, there's no reason not to hire residents of the city as judges. So I anticipate that that'll go smoothly, and I will make sure that, it does. We constantly talk with our county, county representatives about this thing. So I think that it's good. It's good to have this debate, but I think that it should go smoothly.
All right.
Yeah. Well, even in Section 4.08.070, the board powers are set out there. It says our board shall have charge of and make provisions for all municipal elections, make necessary rules and regulations, re-registration of voters, and conduct of election. All questions decided by the board. It's,
Right, but
this is our code.
There's another section in the code which allows the city council to contract with the county for the processing of the election. So while, with all due respect, Alderman Kirby, you are reading provisions of the code, but there's another code section that says whatever we do, we can delegate to the county, except for turning over legal enforcement and except for not using our city code. But we can turn over the daily processing of the election to the county if the city council approves. So we've gotten to the point now where we have an MOU. It's signed by everybody. It's signed by the mayor. It's signed by the county executive and the county attorney and the lawyer, the attorney for the county board of elections and the administrator for the county board of elections. It's all signed.
And that troubles me also because this body hasn't affixed not a signature.
Well, what we plan to do is that since our code says that we can contract with the county to delegate the management of our election or the processing of our election, that we can, if the council approves, we can, and puts their signatures on a piece of paper, which, as a consent to the contract, that will be enough to satisfy our code.
I'd like to know which one of my colleagues asked for this to be contracted with the county. Personally, I just can't see him stepping in, running our election scot-free with what I just heard about a golf course. That
I think what you heard is that the county has lots of money, meaning they have enough money to give us $750.
So why now?
Well, no.
So why now? Why this one election? Why do they want this one election?
To be frank, because the county executive and I have a relationship personally and professionally. And
so do me and the county executive. We got one too. Okay. Probably not quite as chatty. But
to answer your question directly, it's when you look at this, there's kind of three major benefits. So one, this isn't something new. As Alderwoman Finlayson mentioned, the county had run the city elections in the past. It's not that we're reinventing this from nowhere. City councils in the past have outsourced to the county. Number two, we're saving $200,000. And number three, we're still in control. Our board still has the final say. So for me, it's pretty straightforward.
And that's exactly, that goes to my next point. If we still, in fact, have control, then our machines are going up to the county at the end of the night. Correct?
We don't have any machines.
Oh, we got the hanging chads, Florida. That's even worse.
What happened was the city had contracted out with the county during the last election to use their machines. And the city council decided not to, well, not the city, I'll say the mayor decided not to pay the county for it. When that happened, the county wrote it off as bad debt, and it kind of soured the relationship on wanting to help our elections. And I know there's some people shaking their head, but you can check with the county. The city never gave them a check, and they wrote it off as bad debt.
Mr. Mayor, I'm not objecting to that, but it wasn't the last election either.
Must have been 2 elections ago then.
So there's a history, though.
There's a very long history.
There's a huge history. The last election, my recollection that the county ran in the city was the presidential election, the one in which they compelled me to vote in Ward 8, despite me being a sworn public elected official, knowing I've never lived there and I'm ready to create voter fraud. I was compelled to vote there. That's a problem. I think Mills Parole, the machines went down to Mills Parole. It created 2 to 3 hour waits and a line. I mean, that's voter disenfranchising voters. People are going to go home. And I don't know what happened out there. Perhaps Alderman Pendell Charles can tell you, but they didn't slip through free either in the last county run election. So it wasn't that smooth. We had a recount. Big deal. So you want to take our elections and you want to do it for us because we had a recount? That doesn't sound like a reason to take over the city elections.
I don't think anybody's mentioned that at all, that was the reason.
Well, it's in this thought process. They don't have to mention it. It's in this thought process. 1 second, Alderman, on that. And if Ms. Aldridge, the city clerk, has run our elections for so long, then tell me how much consultation went in with her with this MOU. Was she even consulted in this MOU?
I talked with her constantly during the past 3 months about this MOU.
Okay.
She's been kept aware of, of progress and reasons why, and so yes, we talk all the time.
For the record, I'm in favor of it. It's less work. So it works for me.
Okay. Okay. Well, and if we get to this stage where we're going to pass a paper around here to be signed, it probably will be missing a signature, and it'll be Alderman Kirby. Yeah.
I understand. Alderman Arnett?
So an observation and then a question. The observation is somehow the county running the presidential and the gubernatorial elections, they're okay, but not for this. But question is, this is all signed. This is just informational, right? I mean, there's nothing for us to vote on.
No, the city council has to approve. The reason we went through with the county...
Where is that for us to approve?
I have it.
He has the hard copies. The reason we went to this point is we wanted to make sure it was official on both sides. So we wanted to make sure all the details were worked out. The county and the city had agreed upon it. Meaning to go to the county and say, we kind of want to work with you on this MOU. Because I know if I would have gone to this body and said, how would you like the contract with Anne Arundel County? I don't have anything. It's just a thought. Would you sign off the contract? Pretty sure everybody on this body would have voted no.
But there's no action before us tonight.
Yes,
There is.
there's some.
Where?
Well, the code section says.
We emailed everyone the MOU that was signed like 2 weeks ago.
There's no place for us to sign
No,
the
we have that here.
There's a separate sheet as an
Yeah,
addendum.
I have it here. We needed to get to this point so we could represent to the council that there is a deal here that we have, and the code section says the city council has to contract. So that's why this is on the agenda. It's not something that just the mayor can sign. It says the city council. No, I don't think we need a resolution because the code section says that we can sign a contract with the county. We can delegate this by contract.
So we're about to vote and say aye or no. And that's good, but the real thing is signing the contract that actually matters.
I'm with Alderman Arnett. We don't have just an MOU before us to vote on. We need a resolution. That's how the council speaks.
Well, the code section says, I'm reading it right here, the city council may contract with the board of the supervisors of elections. Contract. Well, what I'm trying to say is that we have everybody's signature at this point, and we wanted to get it to this point to be able to present it to the city council as a deal that that everybody's on board with, but we still have to honor the city code.
I'm not trying to be argumentative, but I do not see an action in our...
The MOU probably should have been uploaded within there, but that's...
The MOU is there.
Oh, it is.
The MOU is there.
No place for our signatures on the MOU. So is there a vote?
This would be an exhibit to the MOU. This would be an exhibit to the MOU. I can pass this around to others if you want to see it. It's simply a consent, which would be an exhibit. And once if someone consents to a contract, they become parties to the contract.
They just sign it on at the end. Alderman Budge.
If I may address Alderman Arnett, there is a motion on the floor. Yeah.
Yeah.
And if we vote on it, there's your vote.
Yes, you can. Yeah, you got it. We're not. That's just to show people. We're just going to sign one.
Yeah, we would just sign one as you can't be compelled to sign.
Yeah.
Right? We all know that.
What's your sign?
Alderman Arnett?
I didn't remember. What was the nature of the motion?
The motion was to adopt ID 32316, the administrative processing of the 2017 primary and general elections. It was motion and seconded, and then a lengthy discussion.
So what do we vote on?
We are voting on if we're going to accept the MOU and have Anne Arundel County run our primary and general elections.
Without the signatures or resolution?
We are voting on this as the will of the body, but the thing that actually matters is signing the document. Certain people on the council expressed we should have a formal vote, which is what we're doing now. The legal part that actually matters is a signature, which we can do at the end of the meeting. So it's
Well, not the sign vote, no.
and seconded. Any other discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed?
No.
All right. The ayes have it. Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the next item?
No.
Mr. Mayor, next on the agenda are discussion of City Council work session dates and also City Council, meeting dates. Yeah, the first one is City Council work session dates.
That is ID 32416. And is there a motion to adopt? Or is there a motion to amend? I apologize.
So moved.
Wait a minute, has it been moved yet? I move the adoption of the council work session calendar.
Okay.
Now, is there a motion to amend?
A motion to amend.
Yes.
For the work session, propose that we move the February 16th date to February 23rd. Do you want to do one by one?
Let's do them all at the same time.
Okay. September 21 to September 14, October 19 to October 26.
Is there a second to that amended?
Second.
All right. Yep, all three. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Discussion.
What?
We already voted, I'm sorry.
I didn't vote.
Well, you missed out. The other ones did. Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the next item?
Okay, Mr. Mayor, the next item is the discussion about changing some City Council meeting dates in 2017.
Is there a motion to accept ID 32416? Is there a second?
Second.
Is there a motion to amend?
Move to amend. I propose that we move the April 10th meeting to April 3rd, July 24th to July 31st, and September 25th to October 2nd.
Yeah. Second in discussion. Is there a second?
Second.
On that?
I think that we try to have as much as possible regularly scheduled council meeting times. Clearly, one of the exceptions to that is when there's religious holidays, and I don't know which ones of these.
April 10th.
April 10th.
First
So
night
I
of
clearly
Passover.
support that. I am loath to, although I have to admit I'm not sure how many of my constituents are just dying for the second and fourth Monday of the month. I am loath to move it around unless there's some really compelling reason. I think religious holiday, we do it for MML, so I find that less compelling, but certainly we do it. So can we hear the rationale for the, other than the religious one, the April one, what are the other two dates?
Personal work conflict. I know I'll be out of town for other work commitments.
And those are when?
July 24th and September 22nd. I'm sorry, September 25th.
September.
I don't disagree with anything you said. April 10th, like I said, that's the first night of Passover. Probably a bad idea to have a meeting that night. The other two is work conflicts. Be great if the body doesn't choose to move the amendments. Move the dates. That's fine. I just thought I should raise them before it
Can
out of
I
hearing.
just ask a question? Based on the fact that the last city council meeting for 2017 is in October next year, you changing these dates will back up the deadlines for the legislation to go through its process. So it may stop legislation from moving if you change this date. And we sent out a memo about 2 meetings ago, your last day that you can get a charter amendment through, a resolution, ordinance if it goes to planning commission. That's going to change that document. So I just want you to be aware, if you change the date, that we're going to have to amend the document, and it'll push back any legislation you might want to get through the system before the end of your term. So, just an FYI.
May I ask, are you only referring to one date?
I'm talking about the October 19th date change to the 26th.
October 19th.
I mean, I'm sorry, the September 25th date changed to October 2nd. I'm sorry.
So it sounds like
2017.
So the only religious one is the April 10th to April 3rd?
Yes.
Well, April 24th is my birthday. Can we, take that into account too?
Yeah.
Could I
Well,
add that
April
on?
19th is, June 19th is mine, and I'm not asking to be changed, because, we can have a party right here, so.
July 24th is
And
fine.
Joe's
Alderman
too.
Bud.
We can have a party here.
Alderman Bud.
Yeah, I think I am amenable to the July 31st, though getting out of here in the summer is sooner rather than later is a good thing. And I'm happy to go with the will of my colleagues. I think the second meeting in September, though, is a different animal. The moving it into October and having then 3 meetings in October is kind of puzzling. And also moving it up a week, procedurally, when we have meetings, in either way we move it, procedurally we end up with meetings back to back, 1 week to the next. And when we do that, we bottleneck or mess up the hearing process and all of that.
Committee meetings.
Right now, if you introduce an ordinance and you need to have a hearing on it, but you can't do that when you have meetings that are just back to back. So it has to skip 2 meetings, and especially when we're in the end game here. And as we've seen tonight, everybody gets, all of us, get our work organized, and it doesn't really hit in the first meeting in September, but boy, does it pile up in the second meeting. So I'm much more inclined to leave that date alone.
Okay.
Amend the amendment. All right. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Is there a motion to approve ID 32416 as amended?
So moved. Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye with one correction. It's 32516?
Correct, 32516. Apologize. Mr. City Attorney, will you please present the next item?
Mr. Mayor, we're at public hearings. You're going to need a motion to, it's past 10:30 p.m., so we're going to need a motion to get into public hearings.
Is there a motion to extend the meeting past 10:30? Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it.
Who won the debate?
Who won Monday Night Football, more importantly? Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the next item?
Mr. Mayor, first public hearing is 03216 regarding the Economic Development Division.
There's nobody signed up in advance to speak. If you'd like to come forward, now is your opportunity. Seeing no motion, I declare the public hearing on 03216 closed. Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the next item?
Next is 03316 regarding Harbor Line at Chester Marina. It's for the purpose of correcting the configuration. of the Annapolis Harbor Line outboard of Chesapeake Marina.
If nobody signed up in advance, if you'd like to come forward, now is your opportunity. Seeing no motion, I declare the public hearing on O3316 closed. Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the next item?
Next is O3416 regarding the Harbor Line at South Annapolis Yacht Center for the purpose of correcting the configuration of the Annapolis Harbor Line outboard of South Annapolis Yacht Center.
We have one person signed up to speak, Thomas Graham Casser. There, thank you. It's getting late, I don't have my glasses. Thank you. If you just state your name and address for the record, please.
Mayor, I'm deeply concerned with the amendment proposed by Alderman Arnett during the coverage on change of Commonwealth Lane, also known as South Annapolis Yachting Center. Residents of Eastport and several boats like on Creek. Oil Harbor has requested now passageway Creek. Also the station and waiting points proposed.
Is there what?
Bill Kardash and I have met with Boss on that. He assured us that he was also concerned. I believe that Boss and I are in agreement that should the court order recommend to approve the harbor line change to the council, and that the council court order permit strictly to the code, now code 15.18.80, which I have included in the front of your amendment. It reads all key.
Sir, could you please push the button on the front with the green light to turn on? They can't hear you at home.
Okay, it reads.
Thank you.
All T-heads, L-heads, mooring piles, mooring buoys, and anchorages must be set back from the harbor line an appropriate distance to assure that no moored vessel, permanent or temporary obstruction, extends channelward beyond the harbor line. Frank Biba sent an email. It says, if South Annapolis Yacht Club intends to use the outboard end of the T-head for slips, then the T-head has to be set back an appropriate distance from the harbor line to allow a boat to lay in and not cross the harbor line. If the T-head is so close to the harbor line that a boat docked there would cross the harbor line, it would be in violation of 15.18.080. I would also like the City Council and Port Warners to take into consideration the following. Maybe the person or person who originally drew the harbor line, as they are now, took into consideration that this was the narrowest part of Spa Creek and purposely drew the lines in order to protect the safety of boats and human life at this passage area. Paddle boring, kayaks have infiltrated Spa Creek by the hundreds. Most do not have a clue what the rules of the road are and block our waterways and cause congestion and personal safety to themselves. Boats anchor wherever they want in Spa Creek, blocking the channel. And there's very little space now for traffic passing when the bridge opens. Instead of arguing with any parties that are in South Harbor, Bill Kardash and I decided to go meet with Brett Anderson, the president, actually the owner of South Annapolis Yacht Center, and we went over the plans he had, and we let him know of our concerns about the harbor line proposed change. We showed him the city code 15.080, and he seemed aware of this. He assured both of us that his plans for the piers and T-heads would be set back to allow vessels to be docked moored within the newly approved harbor line, and the boats of any type or size would not be docked or moored that would allow them to project outside the harbor line. we expect and we want, and we are not opposing Mr. Anderson's request, but we want it enforced. And we have concerns with how the harbor is enforced now and what rules are done. I think Mr. Brett Anderson had his word. He seems a gentleman, and he made those offices to me directly, and I hope he will make the same to you, the City Council, and to the port wardens. So we're also very concerned that you all need to be looking at the enforcement, because Bill Kardash and I also went to the harbor master's office 2 weeks ago, and we asked the harbor master, the acting harbor master, please show us a map of the harbor line. The answer was, what? Would you show us a map of the harbor line? He says, the only map we have is a picture going back to 1960s. No harbor lines on it. I asked him if I wanted to make a complaint about a mooring that is within, and boats that are within 75 feet of President Point, who would I make the complaint to? He said, not me. Maybe you should write the port wardens. Okay, the time I write the port wardens, the boat's gone. The port warden and the harbor master don't communicate real well about the enforcement of the codes, or even enforcing the codes that are on the books of the city codes right now. So I ask you to keep in touch with that. I also would like that the port warden's findings and the city attorney be well published in advance, 45 days of the city council meeting, so giving taxpayer residents time enough to decide if they want to file appeal under City Code 15.16.080, Port Warden's Hearing Decision Appeals, which states, a person aggrieved by a decision of the Port Wardens may appeal that decision to the Circuit Court of Anne Arundel County in accordance with Maryland Rule and Procedures, Title 7, Chapter 200. I also would like to show you in your amendment what you have there. We all know that you all have the T-heads and the proposed harbor line. And I understand what you feel is a correction of the harbor line that was misdrawn. Mr. Anderson, Brett showed us why his reasoning were that the harbor line was withdrawn. He had good, valid reasons. Also, we could say anything, the safety of the narrowest point of the creek would also be a reason that the person drew it in. I ask you all, I asked Harbor Master, what is the distance between the harbor line now and the other side of the creek? Nobody knows. Not a clue. Harbor Master didn't know it. Nobody knows it. On your addendum, you will see a Google map. It's toward the back. It clearly shows a line drawn from 2 points, 2 different pages, across the creek. One is 148 feet. If you notice the 2 boats on either side of the creek, if you tried to put them face to face, you could not get a boat through the creek. So, we have been living with the plan that is currently there. South Harbor Yachting Center does not plan on using that diagram of piers. They plan on using something like this, which is a T-head. Now, what we're saying, and we showed Mr. Anderson, that if you take this T-head and you're allowed by city code to move it out to the harbor line, you can construct up to the harbor line. But what you cannot do with city code is put a boat or anything outside. So, if his plans show that he's going to project up to the harbor line, then it's up to you, the city council, to protect the residents and the safety of a property to make sure no boats are outside. Now, Mr. Anderson moves this back.
Could you speak into the microphone? I'm sorry, they can't hear you at home.
If Mr. Anderson moves his docks back to allow, let's say, a catamaran, which pays almost 1.5 times the normal rate in Annapolis Harbor, it's 25 feet deep. He moves it back 25 feet, and you approve the new harbor line, then his boat would not be projected outside the harbor line, and we would not disagree with that. So what I am saying is I think what is fair is to allow him to have the harbor line change he wants, knowing that the city council will enforce with all its might that nothing will go outside that that line. And I would like the city attorney to notify the port wardens that we want advance notice of the port warden's decision. We don't want to see it 5 days before the city council meeting, and we have no time to file our appeal. And I hope that when the port wardens approve it, they will see actual plans that they are working on. And we asked Mr. Anderson to start working on that, and he agreed he would do so. And so we don't want to fight. I told Brett I'm not against the development. I just am worried about our creek, and you all have to worry about that too.
I appreciate you coming, and we'll make sure the harbor master enforces the law on the books. And thank you for letting us know about that deficiency that we have. Alderman Arnett?
Well, I'm not even sure the harbor master is the enforcing entity, and that's what this whole issue has brought up. Several things. First of all, we have an incredible hodgepodge with all of our harbor lines, not just here. I have another piece of legislation to fix one on Back Creek. The harbor lines really need to be looked at, but it's particularly critical in areas like this where the passageway is very narrow and where we have a lot of different kinds of boating traffic, some of which is fiberglass and some of which is human flesh, and you know who wins in that battle. So we really do have to pay attention to the harbor lines, but also how we get this enforced. And when I heard the story that the harbor master didn't even know where the harbor lines were, didn't know the distance, which I also didn't know the distances here. This is bringing to the fore a bigger issue, which unfortunately Mr. Anderson will get pulled into because his is the case that brings it up. But this is a much bigger issue. I had intended to go to I intend to go to the port wardens. Right now, even with the harbor line that should be there, there are boats at Sarles or at Petrini that are extending out even past what would be the new harbor line in a very congested area. So this is something that has been sort of a revelation and something that we need to look at in a much bigger picture, and I think council needs to get involved a lot more, at least you and me and Joe, to a lesser extent Fred, because it is affecting our waterways, and we have not really paid close enough attention, I believe. So thank you for your research, first of all.
Alderman Budge?
I think it's also worth adding to the discussion that the council received over the weekend, or actually some of us received over the weekend, the reports from the Maritime Advisory Board. And they compared aerial photos of the harbor, of the piers and layout from, I believe it was 1976, 77, before the harbor lines were established, to the present configuration, or certainly to the present harbor line, and found that the same discrepancy with respect to the harbor line that we're talking about now existed back then.
Correct, but
before the harbor line was created. So
I agree with you, except for there is a code that says if they were done illegally and they are removed, then you have to go back to the original harbor line. So if he pulls those pilings out that are illegal today and builds something else, they're not grandfathered. That harbor line's not grandfathered. So with Mr. Alderman Arnett's deal is to alleviate this situation, because I don't believe Brett is going to use those piers or those pilings or those boats are going to remain in the same configuration. It doesn't make sense. But I just want to make sure that if we grant the harbor line change, we allow him to go out to 22.5 feet as projected by the drawings, that will allow him to use those lines that he is, that nothing further goes out past it. We're willing, I mean, I'm willing to, and I work with a lot of homeowners there in President's Point and Shearwater, and I'm not representing them legally or anything else, but I'm not really wanting to fight Mr. Anderson. I like the development. I just want to control that width of the narrowest point of Spa Creek. Because let me tell you, if you look at one of those pictures in there, I try to get my own boat. I took that picture 2 weeks ago, not during the Panama River. God, it was just a regular weekend, and I couldn't even get my 26-foot boat up the creek without blowing the horn and getting these guys out of the way. These are people with dogs on their boat, kids on their paddle boards, kayakers. It's crazy in Spa Creek. And then they work their way underneath the bridge out in Eagle Alley. We're asking for a major injury, and we've got to control some of this somehow. And you've got to give somebody a right to enforce it. And the anchoring too. It's anchor anywhere you want. And I don't want to get into the pump out situation. See you later.
Is there anyone else who'd like to testify on this?
And I have this for
Sure.
And I guess my question is for Mr. Morris or Mr. Andrews. In the past, I always felt very comfortable that our harbor and all of our waterways were in complete control. I don't feel that way right now. I don't know whether it's change in, people who have the positions. I thought, and I learned this from, I guess, 2 harbor masters back, that they knew where everybody was, how long they were there, whether they belonged there. I mean, total control over our waterways. And now I'm hearing that we don't have control. And we may not know who's out there from one day to the next. And that's a big safety issue for me. So do we have a harbor master that's capable of handling this? Or is it the port wardens whose job is this?
You have 2 separate issues here. One is normal patrol of the waterways, which the harbor master does every day. This is a separate issue on harbor lines, and the harbor master, this issue, when he spoke to someone at the harbor master's office, a few days later we had a conversation about this. And what we can find is the harbor lines are enforced by the port wardens. Now the harbor master can see, and Mr. Arnett brought that up, it's very confusing, the language of who actually has enforcement authority over harbor lines. The harbor master would, if we saw something that looked obvious to us that someone's over what we know to be a harbor line, and the harbor master also has the harbor lines because I provided them to them about a month ago. So they do have all the harbor lines. And so if they see something that looks funny or does look out of order, they will contact the port wardens and make them aware of it. So that's how it's been handled up to date, and it's currently being handled. But the idea of enforcing or who has enforcement on the harbor lines is really something that does need to be cleaned up.
So the port wardens don't have the authority to enforce anything, or do they? Well, that was my next question.
They've been given the authority,
Do
but
they
they're
have
not,
the
yes,
authority,
but they don't
and
have the...
Are they there
Right.
to do
They
it?
don't, they're not on the water, so, right.
And your cohort is joining you here at the table.
Correct.
Mr. Gutlaw.
It's all his fault. Port Wardens has the responsibility of dealing with anything being built. They make applications to boat lifts, piers, replacement of docks, those kinds of things. So they are responsible for enforcing the built environment of property, or coming off of the property. And that harbor line is the establishment of where and how far they can do their pier, do their dock, do their boat lift, all that. That is what the Port Wardens' responsibility. They act as sort of a quasi-judicial board that reviews applications associated with any of the built environment on the waterfront. Harbor Master is the monitor and the patrol of the waterways. So
The rules of the road.
You're right.
We're monitoring the rules of the road of the waterway, correct.
So if someone parks their yacht at the end of the quay and it's not supposed to be there, who handles it? The harbor
The
master.
harbor master notices it, and they would then, we'd have to research with the port wardens to make sure it is indeed a violation.
Okay,
But,
but it would be
but
the
it is
harbor.
of the port warden's responsibility to make sure, what the gentleman was speaking, that we, to the appropriate location, allow that pier so any type of boat does not go beyond that harbor. So when it's docked there, we are approving a pier or a dock or a mooring in a location that would not impact the waterway.
Right now, it's a cooperative process. There isn't one individual body that you could say, you're in charge of enforcing that harbor line. It's more of a joint process between the port wardens and harbor master.
Well, that was going to say,
Because it's not
concerns
clear.
me when there's a joint
Yeah.
responsibility.
Time I get to complain, I call the harbor master, he calls the port warden, 2 days later, that boat's gone. I got nothing to enforce. It's not working, we got a busted system. We need to give the harbor master, my original thought was, where's the Ross? I said, make it a fine. If the boat's outside the harbor line, $200 a day for something under 60 feet, $300 a day for something over 65 feet per day, and then the money goes 75% to the city and 25% to the harbor master's budget. To give them an incentive to enforce the law. You got to have somebody who can enforce the law. I can't call you on Sunday afternoon and say, there's 15 boats stranded at a possible party at a marina, and say, what are you going to do about it? You're not around. Harbor master's not around. Well, they might be around, but they'll be saying, I've got 15 boats to pump out, it'll be the factory, I'll get to it when I get to it. That'll be 8 o'clock at night, and nothing's going on. Port wardens aren't going to be around. You got a busted system.
We're going to work to fix it. Is there anybody else who would like to speak on this? Please come forward. Now is your opportunity.
The reality is I'm not asking for anything that has not already been there. And that the only thing that I ask in the future is that we be enforced at our location the same way that everywhere else around the city is enforced. And I think it's a little bit of a problem because when I studied the harbor line, around the harbor, it's pretty tight all the way around there. And right now, there are a lot of boats throughout the harbor that are parking beyond the harbor line. So the only thing that I ask in the future is that if we are enforced, our enforcement is the same way throughout the city and it be unified. But I'll go on record right now that we're not interested in rebuilding T-head piers where boats are parked outside of the harbor line. Our reconstruction will stay inside the harbor line for piers and boats. And I only ask that we're allowed to rebuild what's been there for documented for the last 42 years.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Alderman Arnett?
The process, and I've gotten a little bit of grief from a longtime friend, but the process is for this to go forward, and is that someone needs to sponsor a legislation to change the harbor line. The aldermanic courtesy is usually that it's the alderman whose ward the water is in. So I have done that, and I'm very happy I've done it, actually, because it's exposed, I have the same concerns you do, Alderwoman Finlayson. I mean, this is exposed a morass and something that we haven't been paying attention to. And as Mr. Anderson just said, there are all kinds of boats encroaching into the harbor line, and we are going to have a bad consequence. And I think it's our job as stewards of the city to try to head that off. And so I think there's going to be a lot more we're going to have to do besides look at this harbor line. I think we're going to have to look at communication between the port wardens and the harbor master. We're going to have to make sure everybody has the most up-to-date information. They know how to enforce it. They're aware of what to look for and all those things. So this is turning into a gigantic issue, just like we need one more gigantic issue. But I'm kind of glad this has cropped up because it's been laying there waiting to get us.
All right. I declare the public hearing on O3416 closed. Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the next item?
Next is a public hearing on O3516, the WYRE lease agreement.
Nobody will sign up in advance to speak. If you'd like to address the council, now is your chance. Seeing no motion in the chambers, I declare the public hearing on O3516 closed. Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the next item?
Next is a public hearing on O3616 having to do with the absentee ballot application in the Elections Code.
If anybody would like to come forward, now is your chance. Alderman Pan.
Mr. Mayor, I would request that you keep the public hearing open on this, even though we may be voting on it at the next meeting. I do know somebody that wanted to be here tonight, couldn't be here. Don't think you'll get a slew of people to come in, but there were one or two that I talked to that I think would like to be heard.
Okay. Do we have to vote on it? Can I just send it open? All right. I'll leave the public hearing open, but still plan to vote on it at the next meeting in October.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the next item?
Next is another public hearing, O3716, the lease for the fall 2020 boat shows.
Nobody will sign up in advance to speak. If you'd like to testify, now's your chance. Seeing no motion, I declare O3716 closed. Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the next item?
Next is another public hearing, O3916, the lease for the spring 2020 boat show.
Nobody was signed up. If you'd like to speak, now's your chance. Seeing no motion, I declare the public hearing on O3916 closed. Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the next item?
Next is another public hearing, O4116, compostable food waste.
Does anybody like to address the council? Now's your chance. Alderman Lippman.
Mr. Mayor, I just want to point out that Anthony Clark testified on this bill earlier. I think he was confused about the order to speak, but I'm sure you'll recall his testimony on the subject.
Alderman Budge.
Yes, I'd like to be added as a sponsor for this legislation.
All right. I declare the public hearing on O4116 closed. We're getting into the legislative actions on our agenda, and we'll take a 5-minute break, and then we'll tackle those.